We are gathered here today in a group that's no judgment, in the Overthinkers Anonymous support group, okay? If you've thought about something too hard that's been on Coronation Street, we're here to help you out.
That's it. I thought you were starting around like we're all gathered here in a room. Nobody's leaving until the suspect has been revealed, which would also have been quite apt for today's mystery podcast. Yeah. We are talking whodunnits, Corrie whodunnits today, considering we have just come to the end of another one, of our most recent one with Joel. We now know, or knew we, who murdered him, who pushed him over the edge of the viaduct, who clobbered him on the head with a brick. It was Lauren, apparently. And so we thought we would...
There's no more to it than that.
No other... Yeah, even... You know, we're still days away, well, days since recording the last podcast, and I am feeling less confident that Corrie knew what it was doing with the body bag Joel in the river now than I was when I recorded. I really wanted to trust them, but it does feel like I'm kind of in the camp that when we see Joel's body bag floating down the river, I think it was just a really bad prop dummy that looked like it was wrapped in plastic.
It was an optical illusion, and I think that they had no idea when they did it that it would be interpreted the way it was. It was really unfortunate, but I think we'll have to just accept.
I think we might do. And even the other clue of Uncle Ronnie and who was the mystery man that he was talking to, that was sold in yesterday's episode.
I hated that.
I think it's all a bit cut and dry, really, but... You never know. I still that kit. He's a wrong one. He's got a mischievous glint in his eye. He does.
A lot of people have said that they didn't enjoy that whodunit, which is a shame because I do like a good whodunit in a soap. Don't you, Michael? Well,
I do. They would probably say the same thing, and this one wasn't one, in their opinion. I didn't mind it in the end. I think we'll get to that when we do because I was
trying to lead you into what makes a good whodunit.
What makes a good whodunit? They're fun. I don't think it's something that should be overused in a soap. And even though we're going to be running down quite a few that Corrie have done in recent years, or stretching right back to the 60s, to be honest, it's not a plot style that has been used, regularly, has it?
I'm going to say that in a soap, it's a real gamble to do a whodunit. I think it's very difficult because there are so many characters, especially these days. There's so many characters, there's so many other storylines going on, and also there are so many annoying people online,
like us,
who are going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, trying to ruin it for everyone and themselves included. So I'm going to say, also, I think Coronation Street's hit rate, not brilliant.
Not always. The problem... I don't want to just get into the negatives, because as I said, I'd love a whodunit on Corrie. The thing that you can get into, the more of them you do, the more you start to recognise the signs and the flags and that, I think they're trying to trick us into... Exactly. So I like it when we're misdirected. I like it when there are red herrings. I like it when we're led up the garden path to think it's one character, but it's actually not. You start to get used to it and you can predict too much, and I wonder whether, like you said before, the days of the internet and rampant speculation online, whether certain whodunits that haven't been so well received might have been better with people just sitting back and enjoying them, maybe.
I reckon, here's an idea, Coronation Street, the next time you do a whodunit, because I think you won't bet it, the temptation's too much. They're really good fun and they get everyone talking and they're good for repeat viewers, they get people coming in. I think make it a really silly, low stakes, funny one. Kind of like who's sending the gnome pictures.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's not even something that I wrote down or thought about for today. But as you mentioned, I also thought of Norris stealing Derek's gnome whilst sending the gnome and sending the picture back to him in the mid-90s. And that was seen as like one of Corrie's stupidest storylines ever.
But it's quite it's notorious. It's kind of lived on a bit. I don't think now. I think people have forgotten about it quite a lot.
And that went on for a good few weeks, as far as I remember.
I'm also going to say Corrie's best whodunit wasn't a murder.
No.
So do we need somebody to die every time? Does it have to be dark and gritty? Because I think that's one thing that people don't like about a whodunit, is that it heralds in a dark period in Coronation Street storytelling.
It doesn't have to, but this one did go down a particularly dark route. And the one that I think my favourite one is the Who Pushed Ken Barlow.
Yes, that is
Corrie's best whodunit. And that did get dark at times. But what I really liked about that one is how it offshooted into different storylines, which we'll get to when we come on to it later, and it involved a lot of main characters.
And it was the revitalisation of the Barlow
family. Yeah, I think if any of the people on the suspects list are not high stakes, then you're immediately going to be like, oh well, it's probably that one then, isn't it? The one that's dispensable.
This is why it's good to do it as not a murder, because number one, you can have a real big character as the victim. You don't have to lose them, and also you don't have to lose the perpetrator either, because a lot of the times, if you're the one who done it, you're going to go to prison or you're going to get killed.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel did manage to have a lucky escape with this one, to be honest, didn't he? I think the fact that he was...
with Ken,
it was his dad that he pushed down the stairs, and Ken was a bit more lenient than, I don't know, some dads might have been. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that for me makes a good whodunit. I suppose maybe, like, really subtle clues put in there as well.
I think I
like looking for clues. I like looking for clues, and I like realising afterwards, I didn't spot that. Like just recently with the Joel storyline, the CS spray, that was staring us right in the face, because, you know, it was the episode before he ended up disappearing. We saw Lauren taking the spray, but completely forgot about it, and I didn't see anybody theorising about that online either. If we had, we probably would have been a lot more confident that it was her that did it, or her involved at least.
Just to jump a little bit to the Joel thing about why I don't think it was a really great whodunit, was because the flashbacks meant that all of the suspects, their motivations and the reason to suspect them were only revealed in kind of a drip-fed kind of way, whereas with something like the Who Pushed Ken storyline, it all came to a head. Like there was weeks of like animosity and grudges and bad behaviour, and then the day that Ken was pushed down the stairs, it could have been anyone, and we knew that it could have been anyone. We didn't need kind of this it's kind of artificial, you know, adding all these, oh, you didn't know this, but here's another clue that you didn't get to see. We saw everything, really. I think
with that we could have guessed. I like them where it could have been anybody. And, I mean, I don't think we could have said for sure, looking at the Who Pushed Ken one, well, it's clearly Daniel then. I know people at the time, some people were saying Daniel, but not everybody was. And I think most of them had a good motive. And you're right up until the reveal, I think lots of the characters, it still could have been them. With the Joel story, it felt as we got more flashbacks, it was more like saying, well, it's not Mason then. It wasn't this one, but it wasn't this one. And by the time we got to that final week, there really were only a few people that it really could have been. And
all the flashbacks weren't really conclusive either. Like, Carla's there and she walks outside and she looks at something. I
didn't mind the drip feed. I quite like...
but she wasn't near anything or looking at anyone or...
Well, she was looking at Max and Lauren, we found out later, didn't we?
Okay, well, I'm not here to it's not like a condemnation
rate your whodunits. Well, it partly is.
Well, no, I know, but I think this is supposed to be an episode you can come back to in the future. But the Joel storyline, I think, it's just too new for us to really have a good perspective on was it good or not. I mean, it got everyone talking from that point of view. It was quite successful.
Well, even if a lot of people were saying, I don't care, we're bored, we don't know, we don't care about the victims, or the victim or the suspect.
If you compare Joel and Ken, like, you've got a bunch of characters who have been in the show collectively, like, I don't know, what, 6 years, if you added it all together. The Barlow family, you're talking about from the beginning of the show, all the way through, generations of a family, characters. Yeah, Daniel was a new character, but he's since proven himself. How many people from the Joel storyline are really going to be in it in 5 years' time? I don't know. I'd like to think quite a few of them, because they're all great actors and they've got a lot of potential, but realistically, not really sure they got staying power. Yeah,
I think you're right. Well, look, let's scroll back, because I was doing a bit of research for this at the weekend, and I was thinking, well, where did the idea of soap whodunits come from? Because whodunit is a tale as old as time. That's predated soap, hasn't it? You know, with the murder mysteries and everything.
You know, I think Agatha Christie is the most famous.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's still one of the most the authors who sold the most amount of books in the history of the universe.
I ended up finding, and this isn't going to be a surprise to anyone, that the Dallas Who Shot JR mystery was really what sparked that interest in soap viewers for the Whodunnit. Now, I'd heard of this, but I didn't really know much about it, and I was fascinated learning about this story and just how globalized, just how huge this story was.
Well, this was this happened in 1980, so
this was the height of we've only got a certain number of channels, so everybody watches the same thing.
There was more of a global culture. There was more of a universal culture. I don't think I knew anyone who watched Dallas. I think the UK. I don't know how popular.
I don't know how popular it was here,
but it became a pop culture phenomena. As kids born in the 80s, you would have, Who Shot JR became a meme before memes even were a concept.
Honestly, I didn't even realise that JR wasn't killed.
I didn't know this either. I was like, what does that mean? He wasn't killed?
He was in all of the episodes of Dallas between 1978 and 1991. He had the highest appearance count, and then I didn't even know this either. Dallas came back for a bit in the 2010s, and he was in that as well for a little bit.
So sorry, what happened?
So he got shot but survived, and then there was this massive whodunit over the course of 6 months or so. So that's quite a long period of guessing. But it was just a global phenomenon. Everybody had an opinion and a theory about who shot JR.
Right, so what actually happened? So he was in the shower and he got shot.
No, he wasn't in the shower. You're confusing it with Bobby Ewing coming back in the shower. I think he was just in his office. So JR Ewing was a villainous oil baron. So I love it straight away that it's somebody has shot a villain.
Good.
And so everybody had a grudge against him. And I think, like you were saying with the Ken story, well, all good whodunits, you'll have people who could have a grudge. Although with the who pushed Ken, I don't think we even realised that it was setting itself up for a whodunit until he was pushed, which was not... That was great about it. We didn't know until the night that he was going to be pushed. I don't know whether that was the case for JR or not, but suddenly everyone's like, who on earth could it be? Even the Queen Mother was asking about who shot JR, because Larry Hagman, who plays him, came across to the UK in the summer of 1980, and the Queen Mother was saying, who shot you? They were like... The Republican Party were printing badges that said a Democrat killed JR as part of their election campaign. There was betting all over the world. I don't think so. I think they were all Republicans on Dallas, weren't they? They were all rich.
So how did they stop people from guessing who done it, Michael?
What do you mean?
I'm trying to lead you in to read out the next part.
Every
actor and crew member was filmed.
Oh, I didn't even read that bit. Yeah, exactly. This was amazing as well. Literally, every single person who worked on the show was filmed shooting him so that nothing would slip out. And Corrie's done the odd multiple ending. Like Gail, when she got sent down, or it was the guilty and the not guilty verdict was filmed. But this, everybody, so it could not leak. Who Killed Tina? We had 4 endings filmed as well. It was just amazing. Even Hagman himself was filmed shooting himself.
Really?
This is an American soap here. You know what they're like in those.
That's amazing.
Anything goes. And the reveal of this was the highest rated TV episode in US history at the time. Nothing had been watched more than this. 83 million viewers in the US. More people than actually voted in that year's general election.
I think any election, surely. No, I was thinking of votes in for each candidate.
So, and in total, 350 million people across the globe tuned in. Thinking about how many people watched the Who Killed Joel reveal, or even one of Corrie's biggest whodunits, that would be dwarfed in comparison to that.
We don't
Everybody
have enough people. Okay, but who was it?
It was his sister-in-law in the end.
We don't even know what the reaction was. I don't think
people were probably shocked. I'm sure, because there was that it literally could have been anybody. They also, I read that when he came back into the show in this 2012 reboot, he was killed off the following year in 2013, because sadly Larry Hagman was very sick towards the end, and I think he had leukemia, and so he had to leave the show, couldn't come back, and they had somebody phoning him up and hearing over the phone he's been shot.
So again?
Yep, and he actually got killed this time. But this was the blueprint for a great soap whodunit.
We don't have this written in the notes, but you know, one of the other big pop culture moments was Who Shot Burns, which is obviously based off
clearly
of this.
based on this. Now that was, I'm going to say 95, 96 maybe, Who Shot
Great.
Mr. Burns. I remember watching that. I think by the time I watched Who Shot Mr. Burns, the conclusion was there for you, because I think there was like a summer holidays, like a 2-3 month period between one season finishing and the next one starting. That was huge, and they were definitely capturing some of the energy that Who Shot JR had. But soap wise, I don't think that in the UK at least they really caught onto it until the Who Shot Phil Mitchell story in 2001, and that was something that I remember hearing a little bit about at the time, but not. I mean, I was not an EastEnders fan, but that was absolutely huge for Emmerdale, for EastEnders. And I think that it was after that Corrie probably started to think, hang on a minute, we should be getting in on this as well. 'Cause other soaps have done whodunits as well, haven't they?
Well, so EastEnders did Who Shot Phil in 2001. We had Neighbours, Who Pushed PR, 2010.
Oh, that's
there
clearly a rip-off.
Emmerdale did Who Chucked Tom King Out a Window.
Yeah.
And also EastEnders did Who Killed Lucy Beale, and there was a whole year-long mystery, and it turned out to be Bobby Beale, who's only 11.
Oh, yes, I remember
was
that.
Was that a parody of his
No,
episode?
but what I remember about that from the time was I'm pretty sure they did a flashback for that. So they had Lucy Beale being killed off, and then a year later they flashed back to showing, aha, it was Bobby. And I remember at the time thinking, whoa, flashbacks to explain who done it in a soap whodunit story. That's very avant-garde, isn't it? And here we are now in 2024 with Corrie employing just the same technique. So certainly soaps inspire each other here.
Oh, definitely. And now apparently everyone's a ghost.
Huh?
Well, because
everyone
Joel's
can be a joke.
Everyone could be
ghost.
A joke, Joel, ghost. Right. So look, if you're gonna say I don't like whodunits, I think they're silly. Coronation Street, it should be like classic times and not rely on things like whodunits. It's not like modern Corrie is too dark. I don't like whodunits. Well, I'll tell you that Coronation Street has been doing whodunits since 1968, so that's only 7 years into its run, and it ran out of ideas. You know, people stealing fish paste and moaning about the vestry being loud at night because somebody's having a teenage party in there. No, murder. The first murder didn't even appear on screen.
No, and this was a good 12 years before Who Shot JR, and you'll be able to hear from us speaking about it that it didn't go anywhere near to the same lengths as publicising this. This was just, well, this might be quite...
This wasn't it wasn't a blueprint for all whodunits and soaps.
Absolutely not.
It was just a Coronation Street murder mystery with Steve Tanner, who was Elsie Tanner's American GI husband.
Well, it seems kind of looking back at it, we've not seen this. That's the thing. We've spoken to people who know more about it. We've seen bits of it and we've read about it. But
some of the major ones are on the DVDs.
It felt like it wasn't necessarily publicised or pushed as a who pushed Steve Tanner. But looking back on it, yeah, it was a bit of a early blueprint, an early prototype of a whodunit, wasn't it? So do you want to say a little bit about what happened?
So Steve Tanner was like Elsie's great love from the war. He was an American soldier that came over, and eventually she was won over by him. They got married. I think it was Coronation Street's first on-screen marriage ceremony.
Yes, I think you're right.
And he took her off to America. And she came back because she did not enjoy America.
Well, it seems like Steve Tanner had a bit of a personality change while he was over there, and he left her on her own, in a neighbourhood where she didn't know anyone, and
they probably couldn't understand a word she was saying. And so she came back. He'd fallen out of love with her, so she comes back to the UK, and we get Len, who was always a very good friend and maybe romantic, hopeful for Elsie. Len Fairclough, he goes to confront Steve about how badly he was treating Elsie.
Yeah, so Steve came back kind of following Elsie, but weirdly, he never appeared on screen. This is another reason why this does not fit the template for a usual whodunit. The character who was done you didn't even see.
No,
He'd
just
not been in
hear-
it for a year.
No, you just hear that he was found dead at the bottom of some stairs after we know that Len's gone to confront him. And the main suspects were Elsie and Len, because Joe, the person who actually did it, was G.I. Joe Donnelly, who was another American soldier who was like a rival. Steve owed him money, and he killed him because of it. And he got given an alibi very early on by another GI called Gary Strauss, who did not realise that Joe had killed Steve. So this was a actually really dark storyline, because
Eventually it was, because it wasn't found out for 2 years who pushed Steve, who killed Steve. So, and it wasn't a talking point over those 2 years. I think viewers were just kind of asked to forget about it, or they did forget about it.
I don't know what the plan was here.
No.
Because they had an investigation, there was a court case, the jury returned an open verdict, there was no resolution. And then this character, Joe Donnelly, he is in the show, and he is seeing Irma Barlow.
Yeah, that's 2 years later. He kind of goes off for a bit.
The widow
and then comes
of
back.
David Barlow, Ken's brother, also the daughter of Stan and Hilda, most famously. So he's dating her. And Joe realises that Gary Strauss, who knows that he actually lied about the alibi, he's onto him. So he takes Irma, Minnie and Stan hostage, confesses to Irma that it was him, and there's this really dark scene where he's holding a gun to Stan's head and making him sing Christmas carols. And whenever somebody says, Coronation Street is very dark these days, and it never was, I'll always use this example. Was it 1960? I don't know what date it was
17,
at this point.
maybe, I can't remember.
But this is, we see one of the most beloved characters on the street. Yeah, I guess he was one of the most famous characters, Stan Ogden, being held at gunpoint, being forced to sing a song about Christmas, and then it fades to darkness, and you hear a gunshot, and you've got no idea if Stan's died, what's happened. It turns out Joe shot himself in the head. My goodness me, if you want darkness, you've got it in spades.
Yeah, so that was, I'm going to say that was Corrie's first whodunit mystery, murder-wise at least, and they clearly didn't plan it for that to be, who knows whether this big reveal was supposed to have happened 2 years earlier,
no.
But they made people wait, and I'm sure at the time people were like, oh yeah, it was him. Okay, fine, but never. If you want to go history, that was the first one. There was another murder mystery.
And I don't want to be down on people that say it's dark, and that I totally agree why people would say it. And the thing about it that I would definitely say in the defence of people who think that Corrie's got too dark is that the frequency of these storylines has become far too much. I mean, even I've noticed since Pat Phelan, it's kind of accelerated the number of villains who are murdering people left, right and centre. It took Coronation Street 7 years to get around to something as dark as this, and then they left it for a good while until 1975 so this was another one.
This was Lynn Johnson, the 8th on-screen
It wasn't
death
like 2 years
of
later.
Coronation Street. It was Steve Tanner was quite, I can't remember whether you said this, was quite famously the first murder on Coronation Street, and we didn't even see him on screen. But Lynn Johnson, it felt like a fairly minor story. She was an abused housewife who turned to Len Fairclough, who was a counsellor, for help, not counsellor like Toya Battersby, come and lie on my sofa and tell me all your worries.
We call them counsellors in this country if you work for the council.
Yes, he works for the council. So she goes around his house saying, look, my husband's beating me up. And he says, look, here's an address for a women's refuge. They'll sort you out. Go away. And she keeps coming back to him, and he's just getting more and more annoyed by her cries for help.
Len is not a great man.
No, Len, he wasn't woke, was he?
Oh my goodness.
He didn't need to turn to itv.com/advice. He just said, just get on with it.
I think his spirit lives on in many blowhard men that won't stop appearing on television in the Daily Mail these
days. She comes round his house one day, he starts having a go at her, just leave me alone, so loudly that next door Ken Barlow and his then wife Janet hear him shouting at her.
Suspicious.
Then I think there's a door slam. Later on,
he storms off.
Yeah, he storms off. Ray and Jerry go round there, the house, and find the body of Lynn Johnson on the floor at number 9.
Oops.
Whoops, is it Len? Well, people heard it was him. No, it turned out that it was just the husband, this abusive husband. Who'd have thought? Actually went round there and finished her off. So I don't think it was a murder mystery for too long. Maybe it was a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks or so, because Len's definitely a suspect. For one thing, he's missing for for most of the following episode, but he's accosted by the police and he's questioned, and he kind of says, I didn't do it. Ray and Jerry are also suspects for a little bit because they're the ones that find the body, and often the person that finds the body is there as a suspect. Just ask Sally Metcalf in the Who Killed Frank Foster whodunit. But eventually the husband admits to the murder after firstly he'd said that he'd been playing snooker with his mate, but then the mate cracks when he's told that he could be charged with being an accessory, and Johnson has to confess. Fair cop, gov. It was me. I murdered her.
I done it.
Len Fairclough was probably like, phew, I was like getting pretty close myself, actually. But I don't think that Lynn Johnson necessarily goes down in the Corrie history books as being one of the most exciting stories. We've seen the episode where she's found dead and the one after that, I think.
We have, yeah. I really like that Len was a suspect here, because Len's fascinating. He's a really unlikable guy a lot of the time, but he's also got a bit of a charm and a charisma about him. He kind of reminds me a bit of Charlie Stubbs in a way.
I've grown to like Len a lot more, watching him more, especially in some of the early 60s stuff that we're watching now. He's a real nice, kind of good.
He's not nice.
No, he's just kind of, he's just a
passionate.
fun chap. He's a fun
passionate.
chap. He got, when he would get angry, he'd get heated about stuff, but he was quite fun as well. In some ways, he was a bit David-esque in that he'd be kind of like going at the back with a wry smile while Ina Sharples was having a moan at someone.
He puts people in their place quite a lot. Yeah.
But because he was quite a alpha male kind of guy, he found himself at the heart of quite a few other whodunits at the time, because to pin it on the person who shouts the loudest.
If you want to try to imagine who is kind of similar to him now, I'd say Jeremy Clarkson is quite Len Fairclough-ish. I can totally imagine Len Fairclough decking a producer because he didn't get him a steak. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I also think he'd be down in London doing a protest on behalf of the farmers if he heard about this drama with the government at the moment.
I don't particularly want to go through all of the Corrie whodunits chronologically. I mean, let's touch on Joel for a little bit, because we said earlier, we were talking about was it successful, was it not? I thought that it had some good elements to a whodunit. It had a suspect lineup that was, clearly wasn't immediately obvious who it was who done it, because I'd been saying that it was Kit all the way along. I liked how there were a few clues that we might have got, might not have got. I actually surprised myself by getting quite invested in the whole flashbacky reveal of it. And, go back a few years, I would have hated a flashback on Coronation Street. Nothing I would have wanted less. But every time they've started to bring a flashback into this, I was like, oh yeah, what are we going to find out now? And I know we didn't often find out very much of them, but sometimes I thought that's just enough to tease me. And it was like slowly putting together the pieces of the jigsaw just to make it a bit different, because there is a blueprint for soap whodunits now, and I felt that this one was done differently enough to be interesting. And if they'd have just done it exactly the same as every other soap whodunit, it might not have felt so fresh. It definitely had its downsides. I mean, even things like, some of the clues that really was trying to make us think something being nothing. Like, do you remember at the beginning, Lisa was adamant that, he's definitely killed himself, no more questions, and that kind of got people thinking, is she up to something there? And
I know.
I don't think there's any particular reason why Lisa should have been so adamant, because she was totally innocent of the whole thing.
A lot of the time on this, Coronation Street cops are like, are they a suspect or are they incompetent? Because honestly, I know Lisa Spain's got her fans, and I certainly am one of them, but I think that this was like a smear campaign from Corrie against her, because she just leapt to conclusions in a really uncharacteristic way. It's one of those things where I'm just gonna pretend it didn't happen. The other thing is, she acted so suspiciously for somebody who's supposed to be an incredibly intuitive and competent and caring, like conscientious police officer, because she ran off by herself and she didn't report the crime. She went to the hospital. She didn't say anything about it because she didn't want to do the paperwork and worry about Betsy finding out, which just seems so irresponsible. She jumped to conclusions. She was barking up the wrong tree a lot of the time. And then it turned out she lost her CS spray, forgot that she lost it, never reported it missing. And that turned out to be one of the biggest... You know, she messed up so badly that she ended up being questioned herself, which I don't think...
You said it was uncharacteristic, but, you know, early on in the year, we had a kind of whodunit where she threw Roy in jail with very little evidence. I mean, that was a whodunit, wasn't it? It was like who's abducted Lauren. It was a what's happened to Lauren, but we knew that someone was involved in it. We knew that she had this secret boyfriend, and we're trying to guess who he was. You know, is it Nathan? Is it Joel? Is it, you know, who else did we... Like Tommy Orpington was an outlier on the whole theory stakes. And it's kind of interesting, I suppose, that they've revisited the same sort of format to first unmask Joel and then kill him off.
I think that was the problem a lot of people had. It just felt like a series of whodunits about people that nobody was really bothered about. And again...
People are bothered about Roy.
I don't want to be... It's one of these things, right, that... It's like a byproduct of doing this podcast where you're forced to be critical, and again, overthink things. I wouldn't have thought as much about any of this if I hadn't been doing this podcast. So it's unfortunate, but it just...
I think the thing with Joel as well came out when they had revealed it was him, and it was a great reveal that, you know, in the Britain's Got Talent week, when we got to see her getting clobbered over the head with the chair, and then he stands up and looks at himself in the mirror and he kind of slicks back his greasy heart. That was a brilliant moment. But then when they then did a video of here's all the clues you've missed, there wasn't much really, was there? We'd pieced together the missing necklace clue, and I thought, you know, that was quite... It's fun when you you see something and go, brilliant.
The angel was a red herring. The angel statue.
Yeah, I think that possibly was.
The chair leg. I actually think I liked the Lauren mystery more than I liked the Joel, who killed Joel. And I was going to say, and I kind of trailed off because I've lost my train of thought, but if this was just an ITV drama series, I would have loved it. I think it was okay. I think they would have been able to focus on it more if it was just by a solo storyline and that this was all that happened and it was just a story about a bunch of people, you know, in Northern Street. If this was a side quest, it would have been great. And maybe there is some kind of remit or kind of opportunity for doing a Coronation Street side quest murder mystery storyline that's completely separate. Like I said before, you could have taken this whole story away from Coronation Street and put it in its own show, and I don't know that much would have changed for the residents of Coronation Street except Carla.
Yeah.
Coronation Street's dabbled quite often in offshoots and you know, what's it called after Lights Out? What is it? All those side quest ones, what are they called? Spin-offs, right? Why not if you want to do a murder mystery, why not do a completely separate story where if you don't like dark stuff and gritty stuff and murder stuff, you don't have to watch it? Because you might as well have done it with these people, because most of them haven't been in the show for that long.
What did you think of the presentation of it? I know you've said that you were a bit let down by the flashbacks. Was it just the content of the flashbacks, or was it the whole concept of using a flashback to tell a murder mystery story?
I think Coronation Street had a really good concept, and they went, I know what we'll do. But then the substance wasn't there to back it up. And I don't know how it happened, but it just feels like there was... Each flashback should have reconfirmed your suspicion of the person in the flashback. You should have watched it and gone, hang on, now what are they up to? What are they doing? But that's not what happened.
It was the opposite.
Carla was in no way a suspect based on her flashback. She just came out of the factory and saw something.
Yeah,
it could have been anyone, but we know it wasn't Joel because Joel was never there. On the street, so that was just a silly one.
But you've got to put some red herrings in, even like
it wasn't a red herring though. It just wasn't. It didn't mean anything.
The creaky gate at Max and Lawrence.
That
we
was
were
a
theorising
letdown.
about that.
There's a difference between a red herring and a letdown.
What's that then?
Well, a red herring's like, what? It's just a misdirection that's clever, and a letdown's like, oh no, it just turned out to be
it was just nothing.
Like, what was that? What was that creak? Oh, sorry, I farted. That's not a red herring, is it? That's just a letdown, like, or a let off.
What about the...
I don't want to talk about this too much because I feel like
What about the photo? Because I quite liked the concept of having a photo of suspects that builds up. Because usually when they have this kind of story, you'll have your publicity photo, won't you? And it's like, it could be any of these. And then, you know, as seasoned soap whodunit watchers, your mind immediately goes to probably none of them. But at least with this, I quite liked how they were building it up. The problem was nobody in the final photo was a surprise that they were there. Like, literally, I could have told you every single person that was going to be on that photo right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I might have thrown Betsy in as well. And I think if they'd have done it where there'd been the odd, you didn't think they were a suspect, would you? But this flashback shows that actually they were involved. I mean, Billy was involved apparently because Dee Dee goes and confesses to him on the night that it happened. If they'd have shown perhaps that flashback midway through and then thrown Billy into the mix as a possible subject,
I think that was
could have
weird.
been a nice little swerve ball.
Because that was literally one scene where Dee Dee goes, I don't know, I don't want to keep.
Well, it looks like we've got differing opinions on it.
We don't. What do you mean?
Well, you seem to be a bit more down on it than me. I quite enjoyed it. I think what's left me with more of a positive thought about this one is that I was so adamant it was Kit, and then it wasn't. And I don't often like to be proven wrong, but in this case, I did.
You want to be.
And
in a whodunit, you don't want to get it right.
No, you don't, unless
you want to be surprised.
You think you've spotted something that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And think,
like a body bag.
I bet it's this person. If you've come up with a really clever theory, and then but it seemed like they were leading you to think it was Kit because he was being really dodgy. It wasn't like, I picked up on a little subtle hint that could make me think it's Kit here. But as I say, if we just thought about the CS spray, then we might have thought it was him.
Him or her?
Sorry, might have thought it was Lauren.
One thing that Coronation Street, a challenge for the modern era, is the publicity that goes alongside the whodunit. And the suspect photo being filled in was an interesting concept. I don't think it worked, for the reasons that you said. I think it would have been more effective if they started off with everybody and removed people with the flashbacks. But the thing about it, like I said in other podcasts, is that I don't necessarily think the publicity and the concept and the writing and everything is all as cohesive as you would imagine. I think that they just, the publicity department gets given an idea and they've got to sell it. It's the same with anything. Any kind of publicity is a second thought to the people, as it should be really, making the story. And so you have to market and promote it in your own creative way. And sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I liked how they had that ITVX special on Friday as well. They tried to make a big thing of it.
I like that.
And there were lots of people that were really invested in it.
New things.
Definitely try new things. That gets in the points. But I think, for me, the aspect of it that made it less successful was the fact that there were the characters involved. I love Dee Dee. I think Kyla's a Corrie icon, but there just weren't enough people in it that were high enough stakes, and even the victim himself wasn't high enough stakes. JR, going back to that Dallas story, biggest character in the show, dastardliest villain of them all, versus Joel, a guy who'd been in it for a year, had gone pretty much under the radar in his first 6 months of the show, and he did a fast, pretty good stab at being a villain in the last few months. But I think that it would have been better if it had been someone we'd cared about more.
And I know you don't agree with this, but I think that it's fair and understandable to say that some of this must have been slipped through the cracks of the transition, because over the course of
between producers,
18 months, this storyline has been in the workings and filming or whatever, planning for 18 months, they've said, and that period of time straddles 3 producers on Coronation Street. You've got Ian McLeod, you've got Verity McLeod, and now you've got Kate Brooks. Kate Brooks' first co-credit as producer was the Friday that it was revealed that Lauren was the killer. And I don't think it's unfair to say that in this transitional period, the focus kind of slipped. And that, I don't think that's bad. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying it seems to make sense to me that 3 different creative visions over a storyline as ambitious as this is going to drop the ball somewhere.
What do you think about the fact that it was Lauren
and we had... It's not just the body bag thing as well. I know that a lot of people... Like, I'm over that. I just think there are fundamental issues with...
There was an article, I think it was on The Sun maybe online a couple of days ago, where somebody's saying this was a whodunit done really well. And one of the reasons that they said was that it was Lauren, and Corrie masterfully deflected our attentions from Lauren by not having her appear on the show for very long afterwards. So, you know, we didn't get to see her reaction to, oh my gosh, I've just killed somebody, and maybe the secret mutterings that her and Max might have had together in the weeks following the killing, because they literally weren't in the show. And because we were then, you know, distracted and thinking, oh, I think it's that person, I think it's that person, yeah, we didn't give Lauren much thought. So do you agree that made it successful, or is that just a case of saying, well, of course we're not going to suspect her, she's not in it. Well, and now you've thrown her in at the last minute.
I think the weakness of this is also that we got to see Lauren and Max together a few times and they never mentioned it, and they never gave each other looks. You never saw Dee Dee give any looks to Billy. There are loads of things that don't make sense in hindsight, and if you went through the whole thing again, I think a lot of people would have acted in a way that didn't actually make sense based on the information that we now have about them. And you know, one thing I will say though is that I always said it's more than one person, and there's no way it could have been Lauren by herself because she's too small.
I do like how it was a double act, if it were. I know that Max didn't strike the final blow, but he was there to push the body over, and that's a bit of a fresh take on the usual it was a solo killer.
I think one of the things is it's really hard to as somebody who's listening to this, and also as myself, like, how much of this is sour grapes, how much of this is just me going, oh well, because I couldn't guess it, I think it's rubbish. I don't know. We definitely overthought a lot of it, and I think everyone knew that was going to happen. That was always obvious because the part of the fandom. And I think the same thing about happened to Lost, like this TV show Lost. I think the fans ruined it because I think the ending, I think there was
didn't live up to our expectations and wildest
what can you do about it? Like as a show, you've got to call everybody. You can't just be in for the rabid fans, because imagine if the reveal was some kind of really convoluted and subtle series of clues that you only manage to work out if you spend your every single day for 3 hours on a Coronation Street forum going over footage of old episodes and working it out. That's not what it's about.
No.
But again, like I said before, the problem with doing a whodunit is that you're literally inviting scrutiny. You're inviting fans to do that. You're asking them to engage in a process that is very involved, going over and say, like, here's this person. Why do you think it was them? Why do you think it wasn't them? If you invite scrutiny, you have to be able to stand up to it, and this story didn't really.
Well, let's go back and think about a few other ones.
I think the problem was it was drawn out too long, and I know a lot of people said that this is going on too long. I don't, it's been drawn out too much, and I always say I don't mind because I enjoy it, but in hindsight, it gave us too much time. It's like what happened when Shona came in and we had to guess, why is she so shady and what's her connection to David, and it's like, there's so many different things. Eventually you're going to guess it. It's like throwing 100 darts at a board, you're going to get a bullseye.
Should we go back to some of the other storylines, whodunit storylines that we've seen, and that we could talk about, like, what we remember about it? I think we can talk in more detail about the Joel one because it's so fresh in our memories, and we've not been back and watched any of the old whodunits. I mean, that would have been a gargantuan task, but I'm interested to know, like, what your thoughts are and memories and about what worked and what didn't. So the Frank Foster murder was in 2012, and this was 6 months or so before the podcast started. It would have been quite fun to have had this story as part of the podcast, but equally it probably would have turned into a bit of a moan because from my recollection of it, this was a bit of a dud because we guessed who it was that killed Frank straight away. We were pretty sure, and we ended up being right.
Yeah, so he's up to all kinds of unsavoury things. He tries to rape Maria. She was Carla's PA at the time. And there was no proof, so he went free. He gets engaged to Carla. Carla breaks off the engagement. Frank rapes her. Then he gets charged and cleared of it.
I remember that scene.
This was awful. This was really, this was proper dark.
That was after he did it. He was like, "You made me do it."
Yeah, it's foul. He cons Carla into signing Underworld over to him after he gets cleared of everything, and then she confronts him in the factory. He's upstairs and she follows him up there and says, "Why have you ruined my life?" He wants her to admit that he raped her. And he's like, oh, I know, I've seen the tapes before. I know you're trying to get me to do a confession and you're going to record it. But he finds, instead of a mic, a whiskey bottle and tells her she's an alcoholic and starts teasing her. And he kind of confesses, doesn't he, and gloats.
Yeah,
and
he's like, yeah, I raped you. What are you going to do about it?
I screwed you twice because I raped you and I've got the factory. Fancy going for the hat trick, like he's menacing her, again, threatening her. And then she looks at the whiskey bottle and you're supposed to kind of think, oh, she's going to whack him over the head with it.
I don't know whether you were at the time. I can't remember whether we went into that episode knowing that he was going to be bumped off. But that was a really interesting end of the scene where it's just looking at the whiskey bottle. And then later on, what the next thing that we see is he's dead on the floor in the factory. This is a few scenes later by Sally because
he's found by Sally.
Yeah. Well, we follow Julie and Sean who are walking through the street,
right?
And they walk into the factory and they find Sally with blood on her hands. And there's been quite a few other Coronation Street whodunits where a character's there with the corpse automatically. Could it have been them that did it? Yeah. Sally was quite a strong suspect because she'd been going out with him for a bit. And I think there was a part of the story where he kind of set up his own business and stole some of the Underworld's workers away. And she, always thirsty for power, realised that she could be a bit higher up on the pecking order if she went to work for Foster's.
She gets taken for a fool, really, doesn't she?
Yeah, she really, really does. So her motivation was, you used me and, made me look like an idiot. And this was another reason why Kevin was also a suspect as well, because Sally had told him all about this. I think I remember being a scene where he kind of shouts to Frank, "I'm going to kill you," which is perfect setup for you're coming down the cop shop with me, mister.
Yeah, Carla gets arrested after this murder because she looked like a very likely suspect for all the horrible things that he'd done. Mm-hmm. Also, Peter, very similar to Kevin, he was going out with Carla and he knew about that Frank had raped her. He was having an affair with Carla at the time, even though he was married to Leanne. And
we find out in the end that he couldn't have done it because he was with his AA sponsor, but for a little while he was a suspect because he was saying, "I was so drunk on that night I don't remember what I was doing," which is a fair enough excuse for Peter. You had Michelle was a suspect. She was one of Carla's mates. She'd found this contract that had been signed handing over Underworld over to Frank, and she stole it away. So later on she was found with this contract in her bag, and it's like, oh, maybe she confronted him and stole the contract there as well.
So one of the things we haven't said yet was that Coronation Street was very upfront and said, these are the suspects.
Yes, they showed, this was one of the early examples of, here is a list of suspects. Well, they had a publicity shot, didn't they? All standing up next to, what's that, what's it called in the police station where a lineup? It's like they had Sally and everyone in the police lineup photos, and they said it's one of these.
Yeah, this is an example of Coronation Street's publicity department working hand in hand to kind of add a bit of extra information and maybe misdirection in this case. To the story. It's definitely an artifact of Coronation Street that is unavoidable. You can't separate really a lot of this, even though I would love it if it was just purely only the information that you saw on the screen. But, then where would we be?
Exactly.
So, why was it a misdirection, Michael?
Well, because it turns out that it was none of them.
Yes.
And I think that was a massive flub, because all it ended up, it didn't leave us, and I think it was supposed to leave us thinking, oh, you guys, you said it was one of these, and actually it wasn't. I never thought it was Anne. But it just really left me thinking, so I can't trust you then?
I know, this is
you
one
told
of
me
the
it was one of these and it wasn't, and I didn't think it was.
This is one of the things that I was getting in my on my high horse about the last time we did the street talk about, you know, I don't want Coronation Street to lie to me. They didn't, you know, the Killer on the Cobbles, I think was not that, but because of this storyline, I don't really always trust Coronation Street.
It is because of this storyline that we can't always trust what they say, and then hold a grudge for 12 years later.
It's really not fair to give somebody, you got to give somebody a fair chance of doing it. I want to be tricked. Don't get me wrong. I don't really want to guess it. I want to be bamboozled, but I don't want to be lied to in the pursuit of that, and that's what they did here.
Well, the other thing was, you know, the list of suspects were big names, and that's what set this apart from the Joel one. You know, if any of these characters had turned out to be a
Kevin,
murderer,
Peter, Carla, Sally,
mega. But it was like, oh no, it's the character, it's his mum who's been in the show, I don't know, 6 months or so, let's say, and so now the murderer and the murderer victim are out of the show because she ends up. Did she confess to Sally? I think, but basically, the story goes was that
she'd heard the conversation between Frank and Carla.
Yeah.
Then she had a go at him and says, "Look, you're a terrible son. You've caused your father's death because he was worrying about your court case and everything." And then Frank calls her a silly old woman. So Anne grabs Carla's bottle and hits him on the head.
We didn't
and he falls
see
down
any
the
of
stairs.
this. This was the the pre-flashback era, of course. But later on, Anne confesses this to Sally at her home, and then Sally tries to escape. Is quite an exciting. Is she going to clobber Sally as well? But eventually, Carla comes round and. She's shipped off to the police station. But all we were left with at the end of that story, in my mind, was the villain who had only been in the show for 12 months is now gone, and his mum, who's been in the show for not even any time at all, is also gone, and things were kind of put back the way they were.
Yep.
And I don't remember there being any exciting offshoots or anything. I thought that Andrew Lancel, who played Frank Foster, did a really good job.
He was great.
Of being just kind of chilling and kind of emotionless.
Ruthless. Yeah.
Yeah, he was no panto villain. He was like, God, you are actually
He's
quite
actually,
a scary guy.
Yeah, a lot of Corrie villains are camp.
Pat, he was not.
Pat Phelan, Uncle Stephen, and Joel have all been very camp villains. Very,
very pantomime. Very.
I don't mind that at all. I think if you're going to do a dark story on Coronation Street, you kind of have to have a bit of a camp villain just to not make everyone, super depressed. And Pat didn't have that much campness to him, but Stephen and Joel definitely really, really hammed it up at times.
Yeah.
So I think that helps to balance it out. But like you said, Frank Foster was certainly never a villain you could even say, oh yeah, I think he's really fun. I like to watch him. No, because he was foul and irredeemable. And, we often say, oh, I kind of wish they hadn't killed that villain off so he could come back. And, we wouldn't ever want Frank Foster back. And I also find it very interesting how much sexual assault was involved in that storyline, because I don't think they would ever dare to do that now.
Oh, I think they might.
Well, I mean, Joel was like that, yeah. But I think that using that as a kind of a plot device has become something that's rightly criticised by a lot of people because it's very triggering and
exploitative.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think I don't know why we guessed that it was Anne so soon, because I don't think Corrie had done Whodunnits before where it turned out that it was nobody, but it just felt like
obviously
it's obvious because it's not going to be one of those others. So I think that if you're going to have a lineup of it's going to be one of these A grade characters, you got to follow through with it, and sometimes sacrifice a level A character in order to have the biggest shock and the biggest impact.
Yeah, we said many times before, like Coronation Street lacks consequences, and it's been going on for over a decade.
That kind of reminds me a bit of the Who Killed Rana story, which wasn't particularly done as a murder mystery whodunit, but there was in 2019 a bit of story around who was responsible for the collapse of the Underworld roof, and that was another one where the list of people who might have done it, you know, you had some fairly big names there on the suspect list.
Seb,
you had
Gary, Carla, Peter, Nick, Robert.
Yeah, and so, you know, any one of them, if it was going to be one of those people, that could have caused big ripples. And it was one of those people, and it caused a bit of a ripple.
But they never really got caught.
No, they never really got caught for it.
Where's
And
the report?
we're now 5 years into this, and Gary is walking free, being responsible for Rana's murder.
Death.
And
Nobody murdered her.
I'm well, no, but responsible for her death. So this was something that was, you know, this is one of Ian McLeod's earliest storylines.
This was
wasn't
March
it?
2019.
Yeah. March 2019. So when he took over, he said that there's going to be a massive whodunit which turns people against each other and fractures the community.
Well,
He's got that producer patter down perfectly right from the off.
What he wanted was, he said, look, we've had our villains before, like Hillman and Phelan. They come in and they're a villain, but I like people like Mike Baldwin, where they're in it, you know, and they're a character who's out for themselves. And he's saying, I wanted a character like that. I wanted somebody who's an antagonistic person messing with people, and I want to see the genesis of that person rather than bringing somebody new in. This was all a brilliant concept, but it kind of got left by the wayside to the extent you know, Gary is now butter wouldn't melt, I just sit and sell carriage box.
I mean, he was a little bit before then, wasn't he? He came in as part of the Windass family as a bit of a hard nut and a rival to David. But by the time this story had rocked up, he was Mr. Nice Guy, you know, perfect husband, boyfriend sort of material. And this did spiral into him going down the route of being a loan shark, working for Rick Neelan. But it did more feel that he was doing it to be desperate and you know, I need the money to for my family, for my kid, and not for any kind of real self-serving Machiavellian sort of
he was quite a funny
motives.
character, really, because he became a loan shark but he was like a loan shark with a conscience, because I remember that old lady who wanted something or other, like to go on holiday, or she wanted something reasonable, and he felt so bad for her, he just gave her the money, or he did something where he was
Mike
being
Baldwin wouldn't have done that.
soft-hearted. Yet he also killed Rick Neelan by staving his head in with a rock, and he also let Rana die and didn't come forward, and so you know, the juxtaposition of those two things is quite funny.
I remember
really.
when the reveal of that one came out, and I think that was a Britain's Got Talent week.
Reveal of what?
Of who was responsible for the factory roof collapse. And I remember getting quite excited for the reveal. And I think even the way it was done, we were like, oh, it was Gary. It was just the follow-up afterwards. It didn't quite match the severity of the crime.
This at all.
This is when he gets caught and beaten up by Rick Neelan, and he's got threatening him with a golf club in his office, and Gary manages to somehow get the phone off of his desk when he's left there on his own because Neelan's gone off to menace Sarah Louise, I think, and Gary leaves a message on Sarah's answer phone saying, it was me, I feel so guilty, I was responsible for the roof collapse, and then when he manages to escape, he gets to Sarah's phone first, deletes the message, and so she didn't find out about it. I think later on, Sarah does know now. Maria certainly knows about it, and she's perfectly happy to be walking around married to a guy who was responsible for this, you know, fairly serious misconduct. What would you call overlooking of?
Well, it's manslaughter. I don't know, but this was an example of a kind of whodunit that wasn't really a murder. But it was a bit convoluted, and it never came
Somebody died. It did spin off into a few other interesting stories, though, which is something that I think a good whodunit should do. Well, yeah,
Carla was the one who really came off the worst there. Carla was... So the reason why Carla was a suspect was because she had to have this roof fixed, and she didn't really care about how safe it was. She just wanted it done. She said, Gary, just don't worry about it. Do it cheap. So that was why she was in trouble.
No, so she's not, and it's not her fault, because Gary did do what he was told, but it turned out that later on he went back and made it worse. He loosened up some joists or whatever.
Don't remember. It's so convoluted and weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember.
But there's a report that went missing and never got found.
Oh, I think it was because he was so desperately in the doo-doo with money, he thought, well, if I kind of I'll make the factory roof worse, I'll be employed to fix it up and patch it up and
right. Yes, I
improve
remember.
it
He
again.
was trying to make sure he had more work in the future.
Yeah.
Just like Ofsted inspectors.
So Nick...
Just undermine everybody so you're never out of a job.
Nick's been in and out of that factory at the top a few times, hasn't he? And at this point, he was not very happy with Carla's plans to outsource production from Underworld and cut him out of the business completely. He needed more money, potentially, to keep Natalie quiet. Remember, she was the one that was blackmailing... Yeah, and the Butterfly Natalie, exactly. She was there blackmailing him because she knew that he'd stolen Audrey's money. So an insurance job at Underworld would work quite nicely. That's kind of then spin-off into the rest of the stealing of Audrey's money story, whereby he and David would be standing trial for it. David ends up going to prison. So that was quite nicely
he needed
done.
money, and it's possible that he undermined the integrity of the structure to get the insurance money.
Yeah, it was later confirmed that he couldn't have done it because somebody handily saw him jogging a long way away from the factory, which was a bit of a cop-out. This is why it can't be Nick, but hey, you can't win them all.
Then we got Peter, who was rejected by Carla, so maybe he wanted to make her roof collapse to get revenge.
Yeah, you had Robert, who blamed Carla for interfering in his and Michelle's relationship. He was quite an interesting one because he disappeared off screen for a little while after it happened. He was very suspiciously absent.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite a good red herring.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, what's he up to? Is he on the run? But then it turned out that he was having this secret other life with Vicky. Remember Vicky, Irish Vicky.
But you see how...
And so that spanned into another story. So in many ways it was successful for that.
But you see how that is a red herring that's a satisfying twist. Whereas a letdown would have been, no, he was just somewhere else.
Yeah, he was just at home, not getting up to any soapy adventures.
He just heard the gate. It was just the gate creaking. He was always out there hearing the gate creak.
Seb was a suspect as well because he'd fallen out with Gary because Seb had made a pass at Sarah after walking in her in the bath, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to, but we suspected that possibly he'd wanted to get back at Gary by discrediting him. I think Gary had been at that time... Was that when Gary was going through his I'm a bit of an arse of a boss phase and he got Seb to hold a bag of cement over the top of him and then dropped it on his head? Yeah. So Gary was a bit mean there.
He's a bully.
It felt a little bit artificially done. It almost felt like Ian saying, no, he could be bad. But Gary, I just don't see him as a bad guy now, especially now we've met Mikey North, who's absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
It span into lots of interesting stories. It brought back Wayne Hayes, the character that Roy and Hayley had adopted or fostered back in the early 2000s, played by a different actor, but he was brilliant. He was a health and safety inspector, wasn't he? And he'd done a report about what was responsible for the factory roof, and that's the lingering... This was never solved, was it? Because one day Toya finds the report under Nick's because it's been stolen.
Right, so the report gets written by Wayne. Imran tricks Wayne into revealing that the roof had been sabotaged, and this was all written in the report. And Imran thinks it was Nick that did it. Mm-hmm. And then Toya finds the report, which has been hidden and stolen. And it's under Nick and Leanne's mattress.
Yeah,
he says, I was framed, but we never find out who stole the report
and put it under his
Wayne
mattress.
And
that
put it
was
there.
A massive dangling thread that will never be solved. It's very annoying.
I don't understand. I think we said before on Coronation Street that sometimes things are left blank or TBC because they don't want to write themselves into a corner. Like, who's Betsy's biological mum? I don't know if they've decided yet. I would be surprised if they had. And also, I don't think they have any ideas about who her father is. I think they want to leave themselves with options. With this, they must have had an idea about who it was that they wanted that to have been, but they never bothered telling anybody.
What are your memories? I don't know, it's going back 5 years, so it's a bit of a time has passed now. Do you remember enjoying this particular Whodunnit? I think I did, because there are elements of, obviously the Wayne bit I liked. The suspects were all quite important characters, so I thought this is going to rock some boats when the truth comes out. I think this was a pretty effective one.
I don't really remember feeling like it was a whodunit in the same way that all the other ones were. But the factory roof thing, it just felt a bit weird, didn't it? Because the first time we found out that there was anything wrong with the factory roof was when Jenny and Johnny came back after the wedding, and the roof had been taken away.
So that's when Phelan and the others put a new roof on, and I think even like Phelan was posthumously a suspect in this whodunit, because it was like, did Phelan not put the roof on properly?
And who also, so it was Eva. Eva was the one who took the roof away. Who took the roof
Eva
away?
and Adam conspired.
Really, the thing about this was it was so convoluted, and there's so much responsibility diffused over so many people who were acting like idiots that at the end of the day, everyone killed Rana, really.
Well, the reason that the roof in this time needed patching up was because of the fire, the boat fire that had Peter's boat fire that had caught onto it. But
the roof's just screwed.
I thought that was an okay whodunit.
Carla also could have been responsible, because just because it turned out that Gary did a better job than she told him to, doesn't mean that she isn't responsible for saying, don't worry about it, just do it as cheap as you can.
Yeah. That was kind of it for Corrie whodunits, murder-wise at least. There was a little one in around 2000 when Tony Horrocks turned up dead. So this is Natalie Horrocks, the landlady's son. He'd not been in the show for a year, 2 years maybe, before his body was dug up, and there was a few months worth of who could it be, who's somebody's killed him obviously and buried him down there, and it turned out that it was drug dealer Jez Quigley, who had never had a scene with Tony Horrocks. Tony had problems with drugs, and he was involved in dealing them and what have you while he was in the show, but then Jez Quigley came into it as the bad boy, and kind of they tied their stories together a little bit, so it was a little bit, dovetailed in there. It wasn't sold as a whodunit particularly, because I think there weren't any suspects that were interesting. It just turned out that Steve discovers one day that Jez did it, and that was that. So I wanted to give that story a bit of a shout out, but that wasn't particularly a whodunit, but I expect that some people at the time were guessing. I don't remember what I was thinking at the time, although it's been put on ITV3 recently, so I wonder if anybody who didn't know was particularly invested in that one.
They also had a who's gonna kill whodunit. Who's gonna kill Liam Connor?
Yeah, so this was who's gonna do it.
Yeah,
they had.
This is an interesting concept. See,
this was an off-screen one.
Rob James Collier, who ended up being in Downton Abbey, so this was a great career move from him. February 2008, he's like, I'm going to leave. And then we get told in June of that year that he's going to get killed, and it's going to be one of three people. It's going to be Tony, Carla, or Maria.
I don't remember this at all. We were big Corrie fans by then. We had our house together. We'd watch it 3-4 days a week, however many days a week it was on. But I don't remember going into this year thinking, "Ooh, he's going to be killed." I suppose pre-podcast days we weren't. There was no social media back then. I didn't go looking around Corrie websites or blogs or discussion forums, so it might have just passed me by. But
I think Coronation Street. If you're not talking about it, you're not thinking about it. And I don't know how much we did talk about it before.
I mean, I was adamantly trying to avoid spoilers. I still try to avoid spoilers, but it's not as easy to do.
You would probably not have seen this if you're avoiding spoilers, because again, this is the publicity and the show going hand in hand to create a story that's got a bit more depth to it than just the show alone.
Yeah. Well, according to an article that I found from the time, it was a bit of a sarky article in the Mirror saying, like, who cares? The odds at Paddy Power were 1-2 Tony Gordon, so he was hot favourite, and then 7-2 Carla Connor and Maria Sutherland as it's not going to be her, is it?
6-1.
Kills 6-1. That kills Liam. So the background here was that Liam Connor, this is the dad of current Liam Connor, he was married to Maria, but he'd been having an affair with Carla, who was Tony Gordon's fiance. In October, this is where the publicity drive seems to change a little bit, and it's not switched to it's not kept as who's gonna do it, but it's more this person's gonna do it, but how's it gonna happen?
Really interesting twist.
Yeah. We were told in October, Tony Gordon is going to kill Liam Connor.
All right, you got us.
Yeah.
1 to 2, fine, it was him.
We know it's not going to be.
But how?
But what they did here, which was really clever, and this is kind of similar in a way to the Who Shot JR, where they showed everybody doing it. They filmed 3 different deaths for Liam Connor. So one of them was Tony goes to Victoria Court and throws him off a balcony. Another one was Tony shoots Liam with a real gun during a paintball match.
And the third one, seeing that one.
The third one was what actually happened, which is he gets mown down on the street. Well, they had the paintball match in the show. This was the stag do.
That's why I remember it then.
I think, and maybe I remember thinking this as I watched it, we didn't know when we watched the paintball match, like, is he actually going to kill him here? So we were like on the edge of our seats. Is he going to shoot him here? You get to the end of the episode 4, he didn't.
Does do a lot of menacing, and he had loads of opportunities. This was a real great way of creating tension. This was I think this was a good way of doing it. This was a different way of doing it, and it worked.
You can see pictures for this now. If you go online, I can't remember whether you have to go on the Wayback Machine to see the pictures or whether a Google search will do it, but there are pictures available of Liam dead on the cobbles, having fallen from Victoria Court. There's a couple of pictures of Tony Gordon standing over his dead body, dressed in their army camouflage gear in the paintball arena, and then obviously there's plenty from the mowing down one, because that's what happened. They did put the videos up on the ITV website, and you could go back on the Wayback Machine and click here to watch the scenes, but you can't watch them now. And I don't know whether this is lost media or whether in the archives Coronation Street still got them. I would assume that they still do. But yeah, that was really interesting, and it's what the technique that they employed again for the Who's Gonna Kill Tina a few years later, where they say, here are a selection of endings. It's going to be one of them, but this will be enough to keep you guessing.
I wonder whether they just can't do this now because of having 6 episodes a week.
What, as in they don't have time for filming alternatives?
You can't bugger around and
I think they still could. If it was just 3.
No, I know what you're saying. And yeah, we know. If you're filming a scene and it's like 30 seconds, how much time does it really take? But think about the fact that you've got to get into costume, you've got to get the props, you've got to get the location shoot, and you've got to like doing a he got shot paintball. You're gonna have to get makeup in, make him a corpse. It takes a lot longer than you think. That's like half a day of shooting.
But if there's a story that's going to be one of the big stories of the year, and I think this was, I think you're going to put the extra investment into it. Like, you might as well say, they don't need to use a volume wall. They don't need to show flashbacks. They don't need to have all these woozy camera effects and funny music. But they decide to put part of their budget there, and I think that they might do that. I think they might.
I'm not saying it's through lack of effort, Michael. I'm saying that resources are now so scarce, the money's not there and the time's not there to do this.
Who knows? One can only speculate, can't we?
You think about the Callum storyline, the Joel storyline with Callum Little as Joel. They went behind the scenes and they showed us what they were up to with the volume wall and everything, and they were saying they were there till like the early hours of the morning. And then imagine if they had, okay, right, now you've done that. Now we're going to do an alternative where
it's not even going to be on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there really time? I don't know.
They don't do the online spin-offs at all these days, do they? It's been ages since we've had any online spin-offs, and I suppose that's a money thing. But I don't know. I would have thought that if they were going to film the paintball scene, they might be able to afford to say, right, let's just spend 30 seconds showing him dead on the floor. Excuse me. I don't know, but yeah,
so Tina McIntyre's.
This was the other Who's Gonna Do It, wasn't it?
This was probably. We did the podcast.
This was within the first year of the podcast.
So this was the year after.
Oh wait! It was announced a year after we'd done the podcast. It was 2 years after the podcast started, roughly, that it actually happened. But yeah, it was fairly early on, and yeah. It happened 2 years after the Frank Foster murder.
Yeah, so this is kind of another fast turnaround for one whodunit to another. And I think maybe this was lessons learned being put into effect, because they took, I think, some of the criticism they got, and they turned it into a really successful. This and the Who Pushed Ken, I think, were probably one of the best done.
Yeah, I think that. Well, this wasn't a who done it. It was a who's gonna do it.
Yeah,
and I think that turning it around that way. And it was quick, and
it was very clever because just like with Liam, so Rob Collier, I've forgotten his proper name. He said, "Look, I'm leaving," and there's no way.
Collier.
That's it. There's no way of like hiding the fact, because Michelle Kagan at this time, she was like the world's sexiest woman who ever lived, who's ever been in a soap for 5 million years in a row. So there was no hiding the fact that she was going to leave. So they knew they couldn't do a shock death thing. So what they did was use the fact that everyone knew she was leaving and turned it into a who's gonna do it.
Yeah, so as the weeks leading up to this were playing, we were thinking, oh, that's given this person the motive, that's given that person the motive. Whereas what they'll sometimes do with a whodunit is they'll make the murder happen, and then we have to say, oh yeah, there has been motives building up. But this was... Yeah, we wanted to know who's going to be the one that actually gives the killing blow here.
So it's 2013, April, I'm going. September, then we get Tina and Peter having an affair. And I remember really hating the way this went. But it turned out to be a good catalyst. So
it was very much Peter and Tina have got nothing to do with each other. Then one day they talk to each other at a bar, and that's
he
the
looked
beginning
at her, and that's it.
Yeah.
Then in October they said, "Well, we're going to do a whodunit." And then the next year, 2014, is when she died in May. And the week before then, Coronation Street says, "Here you go. Here's the suspects. You got Rob, you got Carla, you got Peter and Tracy." And then they showed us, again, unique in Coronation Street, videos of all 4 of the deaths.
Well, I mean, it's unique as in so much as it's
they
similar
showed
to
us.
what we had with the Tony Gordon to Liam, wasn't it? It's one of these is going to play on TV. The difference here was that they're all very similar to each other.
Well, with Tony, it was he's going to do it, but how? This is who's going to do it. They all do it the same way. They all push her off the side of the balcony. And
I think that there was more of a publicity drive for this one. I mean, back with the Liam story, I don't remember too much about it, but there were a few things on the website which I don't know how frequently visited it was. I don't know whether they had much in the way of trailers or publicity shots for how is Liam gonna be killed. But here they definitely had like picture of the suspects in a lineup. They had there was like a little intro to all of these videos, which was the characters walking down the street and like merging into each other, and then the person who the video is about kind of stops in front of the camera and says, "Who killed Tina? Peter Barlow." And then they show the clip. So there was certainly pushing this as like, whoa, this is something big, more than they did the others. But it was Britain's Got Talent week time after all.
But you see, this is interesting because I don't remember how we talked about this on the podcast, because we avoid spoilers, but Coronation Street really wanted you to know that they wanted you to go into the week with this information under your belt.
Yeah, I don't remember what we did. I wonder whether it was just one of these episodes where we were like, right, everybody, we're going to talk about something that's happening next week. Don't listen if you don't want spoilers. Or it might have been because it was so much in the early days of the podcast, we might have just said, well, we know that she's leaving. Because I know that there's been a few times when, and we don't do this now, but if there was a big name leaving, we would openly talk about it. I think we did with Hayley when Julie Hez said that she was going. We didn't keep that a secret on the podcast.
Yeah, because
it might have been like that.
You just it becomes part of the overall. It kind of transcends spoiler territory, and it's always difficult.
These
for
days,
us
you can
to
have
really
huge names that can be leaving, and we just say la la la. We're not going to mention it.
So,
as difficult as that might be, and everybody knows that we know.
Right. So there were four suspects, and they all killed Tina in the same way, and the motivations were different. So you got Carla, she killed Tina because she found out that she and Peter were having an affair. You got Peter, who said, "I'm leaving you," and she wouldn't let him, so she pushed her off the side.
Some of them, it was more of a struggle. Like I think with the Peter and Tina one, it was just more of a tussle, and she accidentally ends up going over. I mean, it kind of was with Rob a little bit, really.
You just spoiled it now. Tracy, she was being threatened because Tina knew that she was selling stolen hair dryers in her little shop.
Yeah, high stakes here in her what's it called, pawnbrokers.
Yeah, and then Rob, who had the same kind of motivation, which was kind of weak, really.
Yeah, a little bit.
It kind of came out of nowhere. I think Carla and Peter had stronger motives.
They did, but I think that was fine because Rob was a bit of an accident, and Rob was a bit of a sympathetic killer as well, because we then went months where we saw him, trying to. Because he pushed her over the edge, but then he finishes her off with a crowbar or a metal pipe or something down on the street. And then we see him burying it afterwards. And I think there was a little bit about, is he going to get away with it element to it? Because he was a really popular character.
So this was kind of similar to what happened with Uncle Stephen tussling with
Leo.
Yeah. And, if you're a Coronation Street star, and as long as you're not Fizz, don't be standing on a balcony.
You're going to go over.
You're going to die.
Yeah. The Carla one, the clip was quite interesting because the way that plays out is she's there up on the balcony in by the builder's yard, and she's acting all friendly to Tina, and then she kind of reveals that she knows about the affair, and she suddenly goes from caring friend to total murderous bitch on her. It was that was really nicely done.
The fun thing about Carla being in the show, I know that she, she's back on form. Everyone loves her again. She's got a lot of stuff going on, and she's back as boss bitch at the factory. But with any character on Coronation Street, you really do not know if their end is dead or murderer. And if Carla did end up killing somebody, I'd kind of love it.
Is Carla the most suspected person in the Whodunnit? Because she was a suspect in this, suspect in the Frank Foster one.
Yeah, Peter was as well.
Yeah, and and now she's a suspect in this Joel one, which Peter obviously isn't. So I think Carla, she's been wrongfully accused more than anybody. Poor girl. But I don't remember what we thought before we went into it.
I very vividly remember saying confidently on the podcast, it definitely wasn't Rob, because I watched them all back to back, and
you did.
His had really ropey sound
or something, didn't you? You said that was a dodgy clip.
The sound was different in his clip to the rest of them, and it should have been obvious to me that because it was the one that sounded different, it was the real one.
Yeah, I think so we did talk about it on the podcast somehow then. I
don't know how.
I think Tracy, she'd been officially discounted in a few days before it happened. So really when we went into the episode, we were thinking, is it Carla, is it Peter, is it Rob? We know it's really, not Tracy.
I don't remember thinking it was a cop-out. But it kind of is a cop-out because Carla and Peter had by far stronger motives than Rob did.
The other problem with this, that I don't remember from the time, but I've since found out, was that in April of that year, so a month before the murder happened, Kim Marsh, who played Michelle, was papped outside Weatherfield Police Station. And this was, when Weatherfield Police Station was an actual... I don't know, there was an actual police station or just a building done up to look like one in Manchester. So anytime a character went to the police station, they'd be seen by the paps going in. And she was in there. And the article that went with it is, here's Kim Marsh filming some scenes. She's supporting Carla because Rob's being questioned for something. And so that maybe might have given the game away for people who saw that article.
See, isn't this frustrating? Because this is obviously one of the reasons why they decided we need a set. We need a set for all these police drama, court case, prison scenes, hospital scenes. We can't be seen with characters going in and out of any kind of existing court building, whatever. And so they've had to build these places, and then because they built them, they're using space and they have to use them.
Yeah.
Is this the reason why we've got so many bloody police procedural
of course it is. They're builders, they've got to use it. At least with the
court,
because they go to Bolton Town Hall now, don't they, for that? So and they are.
Well, they've got the court set though, the little mini one. They haven't got. I don't know if they've built a big.
No, they haven't built a big one on set, but sometimes characters will be seen or actors will be seen filming outside Bolton Town Hall, and it's like, what's something big coming up here? Right, so. That's, I think, all of the whodunit murder-y ones that we've had in store in Coronation Street, but there have still been some other whodunits that weren't related to murders, weren't there?
Yes, so notorious, infamous, maybe, I don't know. I didn't watch it at the time. This was when you were in France, I think.
No, it wasn't. This was... No, I think this happened over the Easter holidays in 2001, so
I
did
mercifully
know
escaped
No,
this.
this was just before we met.
Okay,
Because
so I had
we
no
met about
idea.
6 months after this. Yeah.
Okay, so poor Toya. Okay, this was probably not billed as Who Raped Toya as a storyline.
It wasn't, but I think
you can sum it up as that, can't you?
I think viewers were encouraged to speculate about who it was, but there was certainly not a lineup of suspects saying, "Hey, which one of these is a rapist?"
A very interesting concept, which I get. I said before about Frank. I'm not sure. But using rape as a sort of storyline device is definitely not something that people would appreciate these days.
Why is murder okay?
I know. I couldn't tell you. I think probably because more, unfortunately, because more women, I'm going to say, and men maybe, but more women have been raped than murdered who can care about it.
I think that maybe
it goes to say,
people being killed has been, part of stories, and murders have been part of narrative.
Women
ever since. No, I know they have, but
I'm just saying
murder has been part of stories in general right from the beginning, and I don't think rape has been as common a story trope, if you like to call it, or
I think it's because
device.
Sadly, women more than you would think experience sexual assault, and it's triggering.
Yeah, I think. I guess though, the more than being murdered, I don't know.
Michael, if you've been murdered, you're not around to say, "I'm sorry, but this triggers me."
No, but the family's victims are. There's probably people whose loved ones have been hit round the head with a hole punch, who are massively triggered.
I'm just trying to be delicate here, but many women have 1 in 3.
So this
have had some kind of sexual assault. So
this story,
using rape as a storyline, is you've got to do it for a reason. And I think the thing about it is that every year we learn more and more about how to support victims and people who are in this situation and how to prevent it. And with the knowledge we have, we change our perspectives about what's acceptable. And I'm never going to knock people for doing something that at the time felt like the right thing to do. And who's to say really that stories like this didn't contribute to us understanding better what it's like?
Well, this story was very well received in that Georgia Taylor was nominated for awards. The story was nominated for awards. She was absolutely brilliant.
I've seen clips and episodes.
We've seen the episode after it happened, and this is the longest ever episode of Coronation Street. This was a 70-minute long episode.
This was harrowing.
She was fantastic.
Again,
and so was Vicky Entwistle.
This is, if you're going to say Coronation Street, there are limits, and I think it's too dark. The only time I would ever say I kind of get where you're going is with this story, because it was so raw, because Georgia Taylor is such a fantastically talented actress, and because Toya was a likeable character. This was like another level of
I remember at the
affecting.
time people saying this is not suitable for Easter viewing, because this was over the Easter weekend in 2001.
It's supposed to be celebrating the return of our Lord.
Exactly. And
eating
I think
chocolate.
people were hoping for something a little bit more light-hearted, like more Scenes of the Crucifixion, than this. And people thought that this was just too far. But it was very well done.
It's funny how I don't think that people would give a fig about Easter now.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess not.
I think obviously they were saying Easter is kind of like Christmas. People are watching TV and they've got nothing else to do. Let's try to get this audience and draw them in with some massive story.
I suppose in the same way, people have criticised soaps for showing things that are too graphic or dark or violent or harrowing at Christmas time.
Christmas is definitely a different thing though, isn't it? Because I think in this country, quite particularly, Christmas is incredibly divorced from a religious meaning and has been for a very long time. But even so, when they do something dark at Christmas, everyone complains. Like the Helter Skelter, Jonah shot in a box.
I was thinking exactly that. Yeah,
was probably the darkest Christmas they've ever had, and it got bashed by some people.
For it, yeah.
But it's funny. Like Easter really is only religious. Like there's no reason for Easter to exist. It's a nice holiday, and the kids get time off, and you get the bank holidays either side of the weekend. But it's only there because of religion. There's no secular. There's no when you
I mean,
have
it's,
Christmas,
it's new life, spring has
everyone's
sprung, baby chicks
yeah,
and
I
rabbits
guess so. But
kind of
everyone's
time,
expected
isn't
to
it?
join in at Christmas. You know, you have Christmas, you have Christmas adverts on TV, and you have people of different faiths and backgrounds, and you know, different groups of people celebrating Christmas. And like, hey, I know maybe you're a Muslim, but when you like this. Would you like to have a cracker and a can we sell you some turkey? I don't know. Is it possible? I don't know, but I've definitely seen lots of different people in adverts, but for Christmas. But I've never seen anyone try to sell a Muslim on Easter.
No, I think
Even
you're
though
right.
probably they, you know, because Jesus is a figure in Islam. Why not? Maybe that's an idea. Does anyone want to buy my idea?
I think it was kind of felt that this was a reaction to the Who Shot Phil story on EastEnders, because this had happened the previous year, and you know, this is 20 years after the Who Shot JR. I think this was Corrie going, oh, I think we'd probably better do this as well, because Who Shot Phil Mitchell was huge. It was no 350 million people around the world watching it, but that certainly got bums on seats and people talking about EastEnders. I guess they just didn't want to kill off anybody, and they thought, oh, let's do this. And yeah, it was just a little bit badly pitched. It even had like Jean Alexander, who played Hilda Ogden, getting up on a soapbox and saying
Peter
this.
Baldwin.
And Peter Baldwin, who played Derek Wilton. They both kind of got up and said, this isn't right. Jean Alexander said, a lot of children watch the show and rape is no fit subject for youngsters. So she was more just saying Corrie shouldn't have rape in it, which is, you know... She was an early member, she's an OG member of the Corrie's Too Dark
It just sounds like
crusade.
It just sounds like it should be like, yeah, you're right, Jean. But also, the thing about it is that Coronation Street should be about life, and I think that's a fact. Like I said, it's a fact of life for many people, men and women, that this has happened to them.
Yeah, I know.
There's always some stuff that you're never going to get into on Coronation Street.
There's
always a limit of something, and they pushed
taboo subjects,
they
and
pushed
then they'll
the
push
limit
them.
here. They pushed it here.
Yeah, especially for 2000 early-ish. I mean, it's 20 years ago, but yeah. Coronation Street put out a comment from a spokesperson at the time saying, it's not going to become a whodunit, more a process of elimination, as each man is asked to give DNA samples. I'm like, what's the difference?
No, it's the same thing.
You're right. It was the same thing. I'm gonna say I'm on the camp of it. Really seems to be a reaction to the Phil Mitchell whodunit, and watching the episodes again recently-ish when it was shown on ITVX. It didn't feel in the same way as some of the other whodunits that we've seen, but people were firing accusations around. Is it Jason who did it because he was the one who found her?
Yeah, so what happened was she's in the Ginnell on Easter weekend.
Yeah, she's just been out on a date with lovely Sam Masked Python.
She hears someone whisper her name, and then she's attacked and she's raped, and she doesn't remember.
Yeah, she doesn't remember. So Jason finds her either at the end of the episode or the next episode, I can't remember. So she's accused.
He's accused,
thank you. Sam is also suspected, her boyfriend. He comes round to see how she's doing the next day, and she just screams at him to get out because she's in such a raw emotional state. Dougie Ferguson, the landlord at the pub, is questioned because he and Toyah had had a falling out that had ended in her being sacked. Basically, he'd found that people had been stealing whiskey and watering it down. It was actually Peter, but she got accused of it, and so is this a kind of him getting back at her or something? Peter, who, as I say, was the one that was watering down the whiskey, he was suspected as well because, people said it is the whole fallout in the pub, basically, and he also refused to give a DNA sample as well.
See, Peter's been suspected here.
Yeah, Peter's suspected again. You're right. So Carla and Peter,
the most suspicious couple on Coronation Street.
Yeah, but then it turned out to be none of them. This was almost a prototype for the Frank Foster one. Not that it was a whodunit, of course, Coronation Street, but the person who it turned out to be was a guy called Phil. What was it, Phil
Mitchell?
No, it wasn't Phil Mitchell. That's how much this wanted to be the Phil Mitchell storyline. They actually had a character called Phil. Phil Simmons, it was his name, and he was a character who'd been in it a year or so, very on and off. He'd been living in flats where Dougie Ferguson had tried to evict people unethically, unfairly, illegally, and he and Toyah, Phil and Toyah, had set up a "We Hate Dougie Ferguson" campaign. Look at this arse getting rid of people when he hasn't got no right to. So they were quite chummy, but she'd spurned him when she'd sided with Dougie over some kind of issue. I can't remember what it was, something relating to housing, and so he got annoyed, and he was the one that raped her for that. But he wasn't in the show at the time of the rape, so he wasn't suspected. And even in the weeks after the rape, he wasn't in it. And then he just kind of pops back in, little bit like Max and Lauren, who were under the radar in the wake of Joel's murder. And basically Toyah hears him call her name one point, and then that triggers her name being whispered just before the attack happened, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, It was you." So
yeah,
that was another whodunit where the suspect turns out to be someone who's unexpected, but their departure has no consequence to the show because they weren't a main character anyway.
It's just incredibly unsavoury and uncomfortable and difficult to talk about because of how awful a thing it is. You know, it's just.
Well, do you want to go on to something? Do you want to go on to something lighter then? Who sent cards to Gail?
I don't really remember this either. But I do. It's more a thing of like finding out about it in retrospect. So this was.
We definitely watched it at the time.
Right. So in February of 2006, Sarah gets a birthday card from dead Richard Hillman, and then also Gail gets a Valentine's card, and Dave's like, "Oh no, it wasn't me." It wasn't me, I didn't do it. And then 2 more cards come. Audrey convinces Gail that it was Phil Nail.
Yeah, this was the he's on Classic at the moment. What's a footman called?
What do you mean a footman?
The reflexologist, that's it.
Reflexologist?
Yeah, he does that kind of stuff. He was dating Gail, and Audrey was trying to convince Gail that it was him, and she accuses Phil, and he goes off on one. So yeah, it wasn't him.
Gail gets a card on her birthday in April. She starts to think it's Eileen, and Eileen's like, "No, you're sending them yourself, you crazy cow. Please don't take it seriously."
Obviously. And so we're kind of left thinking, who could it be? It did turn out that it was David in the end. Sorry, spoiler alert, because that's going to be coming up relatively soon on ITV3.
So this went on for quite a long time because it started in February and it ended in May.
Yeah, for such a low stakes story, this was quite a nice way, I thought, of doing a whodunit that was... There was no murder. Nobody was going to get arrested for it. You just want to know who it is. And I don't remember at the time. I barely remember watching this at the time. I don't remember whether I thought it was David or not. But he was one of the suspects that the forum goers were batting around alongside. Could it have been Sarah? Could it have been Scooter? I saw someone was saying as well. Could it have been Bev or Shelley? But yeah,
it was David.
It was David all along. I don't know. That was a... I've got nothing to say about that storyline. It was kind of fun because it was Platinus, and I think roundabout now is when we're seeing the beginning of the Demon David tearaway teen story, because at the moment he's kind of a bit of a cheeky chap in 2005, but he definitely goes down the I'm gonna murder all my family sort of route from 2006 onwards. So that's how it started.
It's also, starting to become more of a thing that forums exist and people have conversations. And
yeah.
I'd really, really love to probably look at like television fandom in as a whole, and Coronation Street specifically, about how did it develop and what was expected and how did things... Because, back in the day, it would have been... You didn't even have soap magazines. It would have just been TV and...
TV guides, yeah.
And women's magazines and things talking about storylines and the tabloids talking about maybe some spoilers and possibly, like Sandra Gough has run away or whatever. And then when the internet started off with like message boards, but then they were very fractured and people didn't really...
We had news groups before then,
yeah,
didn't you?
People didn't, and blogs and things.
Yeah.
And then it's moved into social media, which is completely different from forums. And so Coronation Street's had to adapt as it's gone through to how do we head this off? Because back in the, Coronation Street has a relationship with the press whereby they'll give them information and tell them things in return for a certain level of keeping your mouth shut about stuff. Like, you got to help us make this storyline interesting by supporting this storyline, or like trying to,
but not
trying
saying
to,
this.
like, and obviously the press have got their own agenda. They're not necessarily interested in helping Coronation Street maintain a pretense, and if there's something that they've been they haven't been told and they find out about it, they might try to, you know, release it without Coronation Street letting them. There's a lot of give and take about this, you know, and embargoes and things. So if you get told something specifically and you haven't guessed it yourself, Coronation Street can say, make sure you don't say anything about this until so and so a date. But if you're like just guessing, I reckon it was Lauren, you can say it whenever you like.
Yeah,
and anyone on Twitter can say it. And then you got people, you know, from so-and-so magazine going, well, you know, what's in it for me now? I've been gazumped by this other person who guessed the answer. So there's all this kind of like tension and give and take and between the traditional media and the new media, which is what, you know, social media, where everybody is a journalist and anyone can say anything they like,
even people like us,
even us.
Just running down
I just find it really interesting how Coronation Street's having to adapt to a new world, and how to keep secrets
and do whodunnits with the evolving ways of communicating about them and interacting with fellow viewers. There are a couple of other minor non-murdery whodunits. The David himself gets beaten up in 2000. This was over and done with in about 2 episodes. David's found beaten up in August. Can't remember the attacker. He first thinks that it's Joe and then Jason. I think literally 2 episodes later, Gary admits to David that it was him, because Gary had been sent to prison because David had conned him into robbing Grandad Ted's house. Do you remember that? And so Gary, as a bit of a warning shot across the bow, send somebody to beat David up. So very, very minor.
I don't think it's a bad idea to send somebody to
very, very minor whodunit there. And there was also another one in 2010 which lasted for a week maybe. Who attacked Tracy? Remember this? This was Claire Peacock's exit story.
I remember Claire leaving because she beat Tracy up.
Yeah, this was it. It was kind of a whodunit. So it was at New Year's Eve. Tracy is in number 1 and she hears a knock on the back door. She goes out there and she's like, oh God, what do you want?
They're magnets, aren't they, for being attacked on New Year's Eve.
So we see her opening the door to somebody and saying, what do you want? Next scene, we've got Ken and Deirdre coming home. Deirdre goes into the backyard and Tracy's lying in a pool of blood there.
What are you doing down there?
I know. And Steve's there, helping her out. So this is another It Wasn't Me. This is another Sally Metcalf with Frank Foster, and even
Daniel standing over Ken.
Yeah, and I don't know. I thought that
Pat
Phelan was standing over Ken when Ken was at the bottom of the stairs.
And then Daniel finds him. Yeah.
So there's a few suspects, including Becky and Gail, because Gail had been framed for murder, for example. But it turned out it was Claire Peacock, just because Tracy was a bit of a git, really, and I think she'd probably laughed at the fact that Ashley had just been splattered by a tram a couple of weeks before. So the problem with this one, I guess, was that, you know, I've done a bit of a looking back on the Corrie blog for this. By the time this whodunit happened, there are already spoilers in the press about the character of Claire leaving and Becky helping her to get out of the country, so it was probably fairly easy to guess who it was. And I don't think it was meant to be this huge whodunit, but
just a bit of fun.
Just a little mini one. The next whodunit that we've got that's not a murdering is this Who Pushed Ken story, and we've kind of been building up to this one because this was definitely my favourite of Corrie's whodunits.
This was the best one.
2017 was a vintage year for Coronation Street, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This is Kate Oates firing on all cylinders. We had this storyline. We had the what were the other storylines going on that year? Well, obviously the Pat Phelan stuff was at its height.
Week for this storyline. This was when Nick was caught in quicksand.
Who can forget that?
A lot of stuff happened during that week.
Yeah, 2017 was absolutely fantastic, and this story, I think, because it was the Bethany grooming story that was 2017 as well. And I think this one sometimes get overlooked a little bit, but we were on the edge of our seats during this.
This was peak.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why you liked this one so much?
I'm fairly sure, and I didn't actually uncover any evidence to prove this, but I'm pretty sure that Kate Oates set out to reinvigorate the Platts, and this was part of her strategy.
The Platts.
I keep saying Platts.
The Barlows.
She
definitely did. She definitely did.
Yeah.
She made it quite clear that the Barlows, as the alpha family of the street, were fairly low on numbers at the beginning of 2016. So she wanted to bring a few more back into the fray.
The major family, and they're just upstart newcomers compared to the Barlows.
Oh yeah.
So in March 2017, it all kicked off. And it wasn't until May 2017 that we found out who it was.
Yeah, so this was a couple of months, wasn't it, this story?
Ken. So part of the promotion of this storyline involved a suspect photo to see all the people that could have pushed Ken down the stairs. And it had Pat, Peter, Tracy, Daniel, Sinead and Adam.
I really like this photo. It's similar to the one they used for the Joel photo in that it wasn't... here's some people just superimposed over some police tape. It was a little scene where you could imagine them all there in a room. And I know that the Joel one was superimposed, but it wasn't so obviously a lineup. This is probably my favourite whodunit suspect list, because it's just everybody in Ken's lounge, isn't it? With Ken there at the centre, the number one Corrie character, Ken. And I think that's one of the things that made it so successful, was that it was based around. It seems like it's such an obvious thing to do. You're going to have a whodunit, put it around the OG Ken Barlow. But the other thing that I remember really liking about this at the beginning was the fact that it came out of nowhere. We did not know this was going to happen until it did. And I remember watching the episode, Ken's there listening to music, isn't he, downstairs? And then he hears something and then he goes upstairs.
Well, I can tell
and
you.
And the next thing we know, he's there, dead at the bottom. It's like, oh
He's
my
not
gosh.
Dead, he never dies.
We still call
We
this.
call it the Who Killed Ken storyline.
We do. Even during the podcast, we kept accidentally saying Who Killed Ken.
Maybe he died that day in a parallel universe.
But spun into this huge story which had loads of offshoots, and we had no idea it was coming, and that was brilliant.
Far be it from me again to mention the Joel storyline, but we did see them put together the suspect photo for that, and you could have knocked me down with a feather when I found out that the photos were actually taken in situ. Because all of those I knew that they were taken in different times because they all look so differently lit, but they actually took them in situ in the locations they were standing in the picture. I could have sworn that they were just random Photoshop
against
behind
the green screen.
Well,
anyway,
I don't know what happened with that. So, back in November 2016, Ken confronts Peter and he ends up having a stroke. And this
another
is why...
previewed twist, wasn't it?
Yes.
Ken having that stroke is like, oh my god, nobody knew this was going to happen.
This is why we get Adam Barlow coming back and also Daniel, his estranged son. So this immediately bolsters the Barlows as it is without having this extra storyline. So Ken, as he recovers from this stroke, he learns how to speak again and walk again and everything, but he's just very angry and he's sarcastic and he alienates his family one by one, which is what sets the suspects up. And at the night, we'll get into all the reasons why everyone was a suspect, but he's listening to his music, like you said earlier, alone. Sinead comes to confront him. He doesn't open the door to her, just ignores her. Goes up the stairs. He thinks he hears the back door open.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And he's like, who's there? Nobody replies. So he carries on going up the stairs. And the next time we see him, he's unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. And Daniel comes in and finds Pat Phelan standing over him. So Daniel calls an ambulance.
So good.
They all think that he's had another stroke, but at the hospital they realise that it was no accident. Ken's in a coma, and when he wakes up, he can't remember what happened, but all he knows is he doesn't trust anyone in his family, and he tells the police that it was definitely one of them what done it.
Wasn't it great to have this character that was, definitely pushing it a bit in terms of age, being at the centre of such a huge story? I mean, we still see that to this day. Ken as, you got Ken, you got Rita, you got Audrey as the three golden oldies of the street, if you like. And Audrey and Rita never get given anything really huge in terms of story. I know we had like Audrey with her cataracts or whatever it was the other year and her attempt to taking her own life, but looking back on it, it was a bit of a blip in terms of story. But this was, one of the biggest stories of the year, centred around a character in his 80s. Amazing, and he did such a good job with it.
So, like I said, we have official suspects who are all in the photos, and it does end up being one of the people in the photo. So I'll go through them one by one. Adam Barlow. So Ken had found out that Adam was involved with a drug dealer who owed him money, and Ken takes the money that Adam's going to give to this drug dealer and burns it in front of his face.
Yeah.
Adam ends up getting beaten up about this, and Ken's like, look, just go to Canada and leave everybody alone. And we think that Adam's gone, but we see him lurking around. And the other reason why he's got a bit of a motive is that he's got a grudge. He thinks that Ken's got a grudge against him because his dad was Mike Baldwin.
Of course.
And also Ken... despite what Adam thinks about Ken feeling like he's not, a proper... He kind of has a bit of a space between him. Adam actually ends up being left quite a lot of money in his will, which gets changed right before the pushing. So that gives him another reason to be suspicious. And right before we find out who the real culprit is, we see Ken remembering that he saw Adam's trainers step over him. As he was lying on the ground.
I'd forgotten that.
And actually what had happened was that Adam had come back to the house, seen Ken was on the floor and went, I don't care, stepped over him and
totally
walked off.
Forgotten about that. How heartless.
I know. We've also got Pat Phelan. His main motivation was, apart from the fact we all knew that he was a killer already, is that he was doing Ken's kitchen up for him, and Ken was accusing him of all kinds of things, being lazy, stealing, scamming him out of money. Pat ranted about him, said, in the Rovers. He gets arrested as the major suspect, but there's actually a watertight video evidence Todd finds of him somewhere else.
I think we thought that was a fairly weak motivation for wanting to push Ken.
Yeah.
I think having Pat Phelan there at the time with no particularly good explanation about why did Pat need to be there? I guess it was something to do with his kitchen, I can't remember. But yeah, the whole he didn't like the work I did in the kitchen, so I'm going to murder him.
Well, he's killed
wasn't the
people
best
for less.
excuse.
Also, another sort of fan theory spun from this, which was thinking that Seb had done it because of his, he was working for Pat at the time.
Yeah.
We've got Peter Barlow. Peter Barlow at the time been hanging out with Chloe Moneybags, if you remember, and Chloe was jealous of Toya.
Tipton.
And Chloe told Ken that Peter was drinking again. Ken told Toya this, and then Toya left Peter, and Peter was therefore mad at Ken.
Well,
and also,
Peter's always had some kind of lingering resentment against Ken, hasn't he, for abandoning him as a child and sending him and Susan up to Scotland to live. So it's always something that he comes back to, like, oh, you never wanted me.
There's a lot of guilt as well, because he feels like he's disappointed Ken with his life.
Yeah.
Chloe tries to set Peter up by saying that he's assaulted her, and she sort of tries to pin Ken's assault on him. Then we've got Sinead, and Sinead and Daniel both had motivations because Ken was very disappointed that Daniel didn't want to go to Oxford, and he blamed Sinead for this, and so he manipulated her into leaving Daniel, and also he found out that she was pregnant and kind of made her feel like she had to terminate the pregnancy. So she aborted her child, and she broke up with Daniel to try to make him go to Oxford. And like I said earlier, on the day of the attack, she had actually gotten drunk and gone to the house and banged on the front door. And there's nothing to say that she hadn't gone around the back, let herself in, and then run upstairs and pushed him down the stairs. Tracy Barlow, so she's got form because she's always felt like she's not on the same status as the rest of the biological family. She's adopted. She feels like she's, the the black sheep. She's got form. She's already killed somebody. She also overheard Ken talking about how he's wasted his life with Deirdre. That kind
This
of
was
put a
only
bee in her
like
bonnet.
2 years after Deirdre died as well.
Also, she wanted to buy the premises that the florist is in, and he wouldn't give her the money for it. And she also had found out that that Ken had rewritten the will to give Adam more money. So that was another reason.
I don't think that I really ever thought it could be Tracy. I like how she was a suspect. I like how all of the suspects were quite close to him, because this always felt like this could be huge and blow up whoever it is. But I didn't feel like a letdown when it was Daniel and he got away with it.
I haven't got to that bit.
Spoilers. The other thing with Tracy as well, I was saying earlier that I quite like how these whodunits, the most successful ones, will spin off their own little stories. And Tracy's one included bringing back Rob Donovan, didn't it? Because wasn't he on the run from prison at the time, and she's harbouring him away, and you think that she's hiding him because he might have gone in and killed Ken. I think I'm remembering rightly. Pushed Ken. Sorry, Ken. And having Rob back in that little story where they go on the run because Tracy thinks it could have been Amy as well.
Tracy thinks it's Amy, and she hands herself ends up in the dock.
Yeah, she does, doesn't she? Just to protect Amy.
Spins off the fan theories, because Amy was theorised as possibly being the perpetrator. Number one, she's got bad genes because of Tracy. Number two, Tracy had been bad-mouthing Ken to her as well about everything to do with Deirdre. Also, on the night of the pushing, she was supposed to be doing a music show. He didn't turn up to it, and she also left at a certain point. So she was not where she's supposed to have been when it happened.
So they wanted us to think it could potentially be her.
Tracy definitely suspected her, like I said, because she turned herself in. So we knew at that point it wasn't Tracy. Beth. So Beth was really a suspect because of Sinead, the link with Sinead.
And then the fact that Sinead had to have an abortion, and Beth, is known to be narky at times.
And very fiercely loyal to her family.
Yeah.
Toya, she left Peter because of Ken. But she could have confronted him, and she was with Toby, her husband at the time. Do you remember him? Yeah. I used to call him Greg. Denise. Now, people were very suspicious that Denise had not been in the show for 10 years, but she might have made a return in a shock twist. And funnily enough, that is what actually did happen.
I
but
think
it wasn't
that Denise
her that
Black,
did it.
people were following her career, and she'd been in another soap, I'm sure, beforehand, and then she left that, and people were like, oh, maybe she's coming back to Corrie. There were definitely fairly strong theories that she was going to return, and this tied in very nicely to it. And that was another thing that the actual suspect, or the actual culprit, span off into, was this little story about Daniel's backstory, which was fascinating.
Yeah, we also had Chloe Moneybags, because she tried to frame Peter for the attack, but was it really her that did it? And Seb, like I said before, he also had attacked Jackson Hodge, so he had form for being violent.
If you can't suspect everybody who's punched someone on the street, otherwise you wouldn't fit him in the frame.
And then finally Rob, who had escaped prison, like you said, but it turns out that he and Tracy were like alibis with each other.
So my memories of this story at the time were always changing who I thought it could be.
This is why it's such a great story.
Yeah, every time they kind of led you down another story, revealed something else or another motive, or you go, oh, I think it's them now. I think it was
them then.
Definitely them. Next episode, somebody else is suspected. Oh, it was them. So however they did it, they were absolutely brilliant at taking you by the hand and leading you a merry dance, dancing around these potential suspects that they obviously knew it was. And it was really well done. And that, with the Joel one at the moment, I think they wanted us to think it was Kit, so they could then say, haha, it was Lauren. I mean, that's what it worked with me. But I don't think there was anybody all the way through this story that they were trying to say, keep your eye on this one, it's probably them. Literally, anybody could be a suspect here. The
other thing about it too is that if it had turned out to be anybody else except Daniel, you would have gone, yeah. I see.
Absolutely.
It could have been anybody, but it was Daniel. Yeah. Because we see him on, like I said, on that episode, which was the 26th of May 2017. He goes to his house and he retrieves this book that he'd used to hit Ken in the head with.
That was such a great reveal as well. I don't remember feeling this is a big reveal. It definitely wasn't a cop out, but it also didn't feel like a big reveal. It was just like, Oh my gosh, he's
what's
got
he
a
doing?
bloody book under his... It was him. And I think they even had a little... Rob did a little video of E.T. Talk to the camera as, that's
Mallard.
right, it was me, Rob Mallard, exactly.
This is funny too, because, this Who Pushed Ken storyline was a big whodunit, and Daniel was in that flat and he had the bloody weapon under his floorboards. But also, some years later, you got Dee Dee in the same flat with her bloody hands washing after having attacked Joel.
That flat has seen some things.
It really has. So we get to see this, but nobody else does. So we know that it's Daniel that's done it, but still the rest of the characters haven't caught up, because this is when Adam is taken into custody because of Ken suspecting him because of the trainers.
Right.
So so Tracy and Peter right, okay, so Adam's been taken into custody. We're going to make sure Dad is safe. We're going to send him off with Daniel. They're going to go and redecorate Daniel's flat because he needs to sell it. So Ken and Daniel are kind of secluded in this new location, which is the flat that Daniel's been raised in. And this is when it turns out that Denise has been gone for 7 years. And Daniel's been left to raise himself. And this week was like a massive series of revelations. Yeah. And it was kind of like... It wasn't exactly like Misery, but it was sort of similar in that something's up. These two characters are kind of in isolation. You know that Ken's in danger, but he's got no idea. And he's slowly piecing together all of the pieces and working out that, things aren't quite as they seem. Daniel tries to get Ken to let Adam off the hook, but he won't. He's like, I don't care. He did the wrong thing, so he deserves to be punished. And this is what kind of makes Daniel despair a bit, to know that if Ken does find out it was him, he's not going to get away with it. Yeah. Ken's not going to let him get away with it. Then there's this rose bush in the garden, which is like a really poetic kind of symbolic thing. This yellow rose that was Denise's favourite. And Ken's like, if you're going to move house, we should probably save this. So he digs it up, and underneath it is this box of possessions that belong to Denise. And we were watching this going, oh my God.
Has he killed his mum?
Has he killed her? We thought she was going to come back, but she can't if he's killed her. So then Daniel and Ken have an argument, and, they're confronting one another. And Daniel accuses Ken of abandoning him when he was a kid and not being there for him. And
True.
This makes Ken remember that he said exactly the same thing on the night that he was pushed down the stairs, and it definitely was Daniel that did it. And right as this happens, bloody Denise turns up at the door, and Daniel's like, oh my God. He gets overwhelmed and he runs into the bathroom, and he's got a knife on him.
He was so good. Rob Mallard
was just phenomenal. This whole thing, there's so much drama. It was just so well crafted. The stakes were high. The characters were huge. Mm-hmm. The shock twist return, even though we suspected it, we didn't know that it was possible.
Denise and Rob coming back.
Yes.
Rob
Daniel.
hadn't...
Oh, Rob, sorry.
Rob
Donovan.
Rob Donovan. He hadn't been in it for, 5 years or so, because he was banged up in prison for murder. Denise hadn't been in it for 10. It was just... Week after week, we were totally gripped by this.
Coronation Street.
Was it a disappointment at the end that Daniel got away with it? Ken ends up telling the police, I just remembered and I fell down the stairs myself, sorry.
Yes, Sinead finds the book, dobs Daniel in, Daniel gets arrested, and Ken realises that it's all his fault, actually. And so he tells the police that actually he felt it wasn't Daniel that did it. So even though Daniel's confessed in an interview, the CPS won't go forward with it. So he gets away. And then Ken reads the riot act at all the Barlows and says, look, maybe Daniel did do it, but we're all to blame here. We've all done something wrong. We're a terrible family. We've got to keep our mouths shut and stick together and be Barlows together. And this was so brilliant, because this was like family secrets all together, and they all mistrusted one another. All of the grudges that had led to them being suspects were still in place.
Yeah.
None of them trusted each other. They were all out for blood. And so Ken's kind of lashing these, it's kind of like having a bag of cats having a fight and trying to make sure they don't kill each other, and this leads all the way to Christmas, and lots of other things happen. But
Kate
Oates
had said at the beginning of this, I want to set up the
centre.
Barlows, exactly, I want to bring them back to the forefront again, and it ended with we all got this massive secret. It was just superbly done. I loved how that people were building motives beforehand, but you didn't realise it was leading to a whodunit because it hadn't been publicised in the press. That all the twists, the returns, it was like an absolutely amazing. Even the fact that it wasn't a death.
Yeah.
Because if Ken had been killed during this, a lot of the twists and the revelations wouldn't have counted quite so much, or him remembering things. Obviously, that couldn't have happened if he was dead.
He died and came back as a ghost to solve his own murder. But yeah, you're right. It didn't feel like a cop out. I never once thought, God, I wish they had just killed Ken off because it would have been more dramatic. No, because all of the things that led to the Barlows suspecting one another all were still there as part of the story, and just having Daniel and Denise, what a great, brilliant,
this is
brilliant
the
setup.
soap story, Corrie, to study if you want to do another whodunit. And I liked the Joel one, but this was another level.
I know that everyone...
I think the next one, needs to be the Platts.
Yeah.
Whodunit involving the Platts.
I know that, when we talk about Coronation Street, we talk about some of the big storylines, and, you talk about, the tram crash, amazing, brilliant. Richard Hillman, fantastic, the best they've ever done. Who Pushed Ken is seriously, Coronation Street, one of its high points.
It is. It just didn't get quite the praise and the recognition it deserved in the awards because of the other stories that it was going up against, because it was such a strong year.
But the thing about it is, all the people, again, who say, Coronation Street's too dark, I don't like it. This storyline, if you're that kind of person that doesn't like a dark murder storyline, did you like this one? I hope that you did, because I feel like this is a really good balance between what I like all the dark murder stuff, but nobody died for this storyline, but it was still so dramatic and brilliant. And from my perspective, is this teaching me a lesson? You don't have to kill everyone, Gemma, to have a good gritty storyline that also works really well in a soap.
Yeah.
And again, nobody went to prison, nobody died at the end. Everybody's still there.
Very, very satisfying.
Fantastic stuff.
There's just been, as far as I know, one other whodunit since then, which, we're running very long this week. I didn't know we would be talking for 2 hours about this, but they did do a Who Attacked Adam in 2020, didn't they? Which was, that was a really nice, twisty attack, wasn't it? Because, again, we didn't know this was going to be happening, but at the end of the 60th anniversary week for Coronation Street...
That was the beginning of December.
Yeah.
I thought it was... New Year's Eve.
No. Again, the truth comes out about who did it was New Year's Eve. So the story, the suspicion lasted for about 3 weeks, which was actually quite short in terms of soap whodunits. But yeah, you get at the very end of the week, I think it was the final scene of the week, Adam's there in the bistro, and then somebody comes up behind him, clonks him on the head, and you're already kind of full of, Jeff's been killed this week, Imran's been triumphant at court. And this came out of nowhere and surprised us and set us into a bit of a guessing game for the next 3 weeks. I don't think it was particularly interesting with the characters that were involved. I mean, you got Gary as a suspect. Again, has he been a suspect before? No, he was. Yes, he was. For the factory roof. He actually did it then, because he knew the circumstances Adam knew the circumstances around Rick's death. Sarah...
He also acts suspiciously and asks Maria to give him a false alibi.
Yeah, exactly. He was actually moving Rick's body at the time. That's why he needed a false alibi. You got Sarah, who discovered that Adam, her boyfriend, had copped off with Carla just after the pair had a brief split up. Then she lies about where she was the night of the attack as well, so that's a bit sus. Carla, once again, ashamed of the fling that she'd had with Adam, went on... she also removed blood from Peter's shirt to get rid of it because Carla thought it was Peter.
Yeah.
This was similar to Carla suspecting Peter for killing Tina. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And
well,
that all
came.
Carla realised that it wasn't Peter in the end because Peter thought it was Carla and said as he was on his deathbed or something.
And then Peter's also suspicious.
Yeah. Because
of the blood.
Because of the blood. He it turns out he's just helping somebody who'd cut himself in the red wreck. But I don't remember feeling as excited about this one. I'm not that into Adam as a character. It felt a little bit... I don't know, just treading a familiar ground, really.
Isn't it interesting that we said, we've identified Carla and Peter as being prime suspects in almost anything that happens that's dodgy, and now Peter's not in it. The latest whodunit was for Joel, and the person who was also a suspect in the lineup with Carla was Lisa Swain, who is probably going
On
to
the
be
road to
Carla's new partner. Is she kicking off her new life as Mrs. Connor?
Yeah.
as a suspect in a murder.
Poison chalice, isn't
Carla's
she?
like, look, if you want to be with me, babes, you got to be a suspect in at least one murder, because me and Peter, we used to be prime suspects in everything.
I think we were all just like, as this story was playing out, it was over Christmas, and I don't know, I just didn't feel like the right time of year for this type of story. I was glad when the truth came out that it was Faye. It was a case of mistaken identity. She thought it was nasty Ray Crosby who tried to assault her one time, and she confesses it out of nowhere on New Year's Eve, doesn't she? To Craig, maybe, I can't remember.
New Year's resolution.
Or to Gary as the fireworks are going, and it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting to find that out. Oh, that's a bit boring. And then that didn't really go anywhere, did it?
Did she go to prison?
She did. She went to prison for 8 months or so. But I think Gary might have gone to prison, taking the rap for her for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the best.
It was also a bad year in general for life. It was 2020. It was difficult to make television.
Yeah.
The 60th anniversary was there, and it was, they were trying their best. People were locked up and fed up, and I don't know that much really was a great distraction.
The stories that were spinning off from it, with a few more characters finding out that Gary had killed Rick Neelan, also didn't really go anywhere, did it?
He still got away with it.
He still manages to get away with it.
Because apparently it's okay. It's okay to kill somebody in sort of semi-self-defence as long as the police don't find out.
Exactly.
Which is kind of what I think is going to happen with Lauren.
I do wonder whether it's going to go down that route. But, as I say, the thing that this story did have going for it was that the attack on Adam was not previewed in the press beforehand. So that was a really nice twist at the end of that 60th anniversary week. I think if you're going to go for a who blanked blank, start it off with a complete and utter surprise. And you're already setting yourself up on the right route.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been lots of other, who blanked blank. A lot of them was who got blank pregnant. Who got so-and-so pregnant.
Yeah, who's the daddy stories.
You got Sarah Lou, you got, who was her father. You got Joshua, who's his dad. You got Lily, who's his dad. You got Ollie, who's his dad. You got Alfie, who's his dad.
There's been a handful of who's the daddies over the years. I don't often find those as exciting, to be honest.
They're an interesting, twist, but they do feel a bit boring. Yeah.
Yeah, that. Yeah.
And then also the other twist on it is who is the big baddie going to kill. So
yeah.
We had lots of theories about who is Stephen going to kill. We had a lot of theories about who is Pat going to kill. And I think the biggest one was who is Richard going to kill.
Yeah, because with Stephen and Pat, we were all speculating, well, surely he's got to get one more victim in his final week. Who's it going to be? And for Pat, it turned out that he shot Nicola, but she was fine. He shot Michelle, but she was fine. And then there was nobody, and that felt like a bit of a letdown. And they fell into the same trap with Stephen. They kind of built up his final week as being this massive thing. They never said he was going to kill everybody, but we were all expecting one final victim. And there wasn't in the end.
No.
But Richard, on the other hand, even his final week, he didn't kill anyone else. But I don't know whether we were expecting him to at the time. But there was an awful lot of speculation about who his final victim would be. I suppose with all the way through Stephen and Pat's storylines, we were thinking who's going to kill next. But back in 2002, when Richard was on the rampage, and this was earlier days in the soap, more people were watching it. A heck of a lot more people were watching it. People were placing bets about it. Corrie played into this and released an official list of 11 possible victims for Richard. Turned out that Maxine wasn't even on the list, so that was a bit of I suppose that was along the same lines as here's the suspect list for who killed somebody. It was nobody. It was Frank Foster's mum. And here we were told that Richard is gonna kill either Audrey, Emily, Jack, Vera, Rita, Gail, Aidan, Critchley that is, Norris, Toya, Vikram, and Archie. And it turned out that it wasn't anyone. It was Maxine. I think Tracy Shaw announced around about that time that she was leaving, so maybe they changed what they were going to do to accommodate her departure.
Well, the thing is about it is that actually he was going to kill Emily, so he killed Maxine by accident. So
yeah, by 2003 in January there was a official shortlist of 3: Emily, Toya, and Maxine.
Imagine if he killed Toya.
Well, I mean, this was the time when Georgia Taylor left the show for the first time, and people knew that she was leaving, so it was certainly possible that he could have killed her. Emily, I mean, he was going after her.
She was an older character, and it's always.
We knew that he stood to benefit from killing Emily because of the remortgaging of the house at number 3 that he'd managed to get her to do. There was no benefit to him murdering Toya or Maxine, and in the end Maxine just turned out to be an accident because he was going after Aidan Critchley. But I do like that kind of speculation. It's just a bit of a shame when it's a letdown when there's no victim, isn't there?
Yeah, so there we go. That is it, really. That's our whodunit list.
Yeah, that is, as far as I can remember, all of the big whodunits on Coronation Street. I always forget someone, don't I? So if there's other whodunits that you enjoyed that we haven't remembered to mention here, do write in and let us know. And tell us which one is your favourite. We've made it quite clear that the Ken pushing story was our favourite one. But maybe that wasn't everybody's. Maybe you just loved the Joel one the best. Maybe you thought that the Who bonked Adam on the head was the peak of Corrie whodunits dumb.
Who bonked Leanne?
Well, yeah, there's another Who's. That was actually quite good, wasn't it? The Who bonked Leanne when she got pregnant. Because we saw her getting her mystery visitor in the middle of the night. I think it was about a month or so until it was revealed that it was Steve. But yeah, which ones have you been your favourite?
If you're a man, you can get knocked out. And if you're a woman, you might get knocked up.
Yeah. Is there anything else, any other aspects or elements of the storyline, whodunit storyline, that you really think is important and crucial to make it memorable? We've talked about the importance of the characters, the surprise factor, the twists, but if there's anything else that for you a good whodunit has got to have, do write in and let us know. I would love to hear it, because this is a topic that we're both quite invested in, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
We like
and I'd love to know in like a year, 2 year, 5 years time, what are our thoughts going to be on the Joel storyline. I really hope that in time we grow to sort of like it or see the good sides of it, because
I mean, the thing is, it's not necessarily completely over yet, is it?
No, there's definitely more to come, although it's not to do with Uncle Ronnie.
No, definitely not Ronnie, as far as
and the fallout with the Platts and with Max
yeah.
And what happened with David and bringing Clayton in with Shona. That was a genius. That was a masterstroke. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we might be a little bit previous putting this podcast out now, but you didn't know when the iron would be at its hottest, and it felt like that it's now. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this, everybody. Write in and tell us your thoughts. Goodbye. Ta-ra.